When did you make an epic escape from a terrible situation? I was out in the bluff country of the upper Mississippi with my dog in the early winter. I was at the base of a cliff and came across a hole about 10 inches across that had some moist, warm air coming out. I cave sometimes, and I got excited at the prospect of finding a new, potentially live one. Took my dog home and came back the next day with a helmet, headlamp, and some general caving gear. After kicking out the entrance so it was wide enough for me to crawl in, I proceeded through sort of an upward crawl space, about 1 or 2 feet tall. About 6 feet in, it opened up into a small chamber, and when I shined my headlamp across the floor, it was covered in tiny glints. They were the eyes of rattlesnakes, and I mean hundreds of rattlesnakes. I'd stumbled across one of their winter dens. I slowly backed out and got the whole F out of there. In short, I thought I found a new live cave, came across a rattlesnake hibernation den. Went to Ocean City, Maryland, and there was a full rising moon in the east. I wanted to see it, so I set my alarm for 1 a.m. to watch it over the ocean. You know, that time of year from when the heat, where the moon looks about 6 times as big as it is when it rises, it's blood red. Well, really dark orange anyway. I should have taken that as an omen. As I was walking, I heard a muffled scream or something from behind one of the umbrella boxes or changing stations. I snuck up and some guys were trying to commit the unspeakable act on some girl. I thought it was animals fighting. I had no idea what I'd started to see. Then I heard someone say, "Shut up or we're gonna cut you." One of them had his pants down and she was struggling between the 2 other guys. I don't know why I did it, but I picked up what I guess was a piece of the post fencing and I started beating the crap out of the guys. Since I was quiet because of the sand and it was all to their heads and I was wearing dark colors, I guess I had them by surprise. A whack to each of their heads, so hard that nobody even gave an alert as to what was happening, just falling over. 1, 2, 3, all of them fell down. I was actually scared I'd killed one of them or something, but he was moaning. The girl looked up at me and I said, "Come on, we've got to run now." And we did, as they were getting up. I guess they did because they sounded pretty angry, but I knew I really hit the F out of the first guy. We sprinted as hard as we could on the sand and jumped a fence and rattled some doors and ran into someone who woke up and called the police. Her father thanked me. She told me that they had a gat, or she said they did. She never saw one, just the knife. Turns out her dad was some Muslim priest and she and him had gotten into an argument, so she'd walked off to cool down a bit. Her dad went the other way down the beach to look for her, and then she ran into those drunk college kids. In short, snuck up and beat up some guys trying to commit the unspeakable act on a girl and then booked it out of there faster than lightning. I'm lucky I lived. Well done, and congratulations on finding maybe the best feasible situation where someone can actually sneak up and take on 3 other guys. Most stories of one person taking on multiple assailants, even if that person has like a black belt or something, just don't go very well. Hope the girl was alright. 2001. After just having discovered that my then-wife was having an affair, I decided I need to get out of town for a while to clear my head. The next day, I was on a flight to LA to spend some time with my best friends from high school who'd moved there years prior. What transpired was 2 weeks of insane amounts of drinking and at least one failed trip to drive up to Vegas in the middle of the night. On the night before I had to head back to face the reality of the situation, my friends had concluded that the best remedy for me was to get me into bed with someone else before heading home. After much alcohol consumption, we headed to a club in downtown LA where my friend had heard a person could get special treatment for the right amount of money. To this day, I don't know if it was a nightclub or a joint where women take their clothes off for money, because we never made it past the bouncer at the front door. He turned us away because he could tell how drunk we already were. On the way back to my friend's car, we were approached by a homeless man who was looking for a handout. Instead of giving him some money for one, my friends asked him if he knew of a place where we could go to find female companionship. The man obliged and proceeded to lead us around the corner to a very shady apartment building in what turned out to be a very shady part of town. When we arrived at that building, the homeless man buzzed one of the apartments, and several minutes later, a man appeared at the door who was the spitting image of Eazy-E. For all I know, it was Eazy-E. After whispering with the homeless man, Eazy-E gave each of us a very judging look over and without saying a word nodded for us to follow him. What followed next could sound like it was coming straight from some bad comedy flick or a stereotypical gang flick. 3 white guys climbing up 4 flights of stairs in what was clearly either the worst apartment complex in LA, a straight-up smack house, or both. Around the time we reached the top floor, the combination of fear and adrenaline began to rapidly cleanse my system of all the booze. At this point, we were instructed to wait at the top of the stairs while Eazy-E went down the hall and into one of the apartments. By now, I was completely sober and I began to desperately try and get my friend's attention. Psst, psst, let's get the frick out of here. My friends either couldn't hear me or were too engrossed in seeing what was going to happen next, so neither of them really acknowledged me. I was beginning to really freak out and I slowly began inching my way back to the stairwell, and that is when it happened. All of a sudden, this woman emerged from the apartment down the hall. She was the spitting image of a stereotypical ghetto woman, about 300 pounds, fake hair, long fake nails, giant hoop earrings, wearing nothing but a sports support and biker shorts, both of which were stretched to the max. She sauntered up to our little group, looked over all of us, and in a loud voice announced, "Who wants some of this?" I'm not sure what exactly happened next, but all I remember was running. Before I knew it, I was outside on the street, running back to where I thought our car was. I took a second to look back to see both of my friends chasing behind me, with the homeless man chasing behind them. Luckily, I found our car, and we all jumped in and got the frick out of there as fast as was humanely possible. In short, who wants to get some of this? It was my late junior year of high school, and I was at another school's house party. It was all going pretty well, except there was a lot of people in the backyard. Eventually, one of the neighbors that was family friends came over. It was a husband and wife, both in their 40s, in full-on suburban warfare mood. Put the ganja and alcohol down, we called the cops, they're on our way. At the time, I was on probation for a minor possession charge, so all I needed to hear was cops and I was gone. I left through the front of the house, running like the devil himself was chasing me. I was out of the house, down the street, and in my car before anybody else had even moved. I brought my car back to the house to get my friends, but these people were blocking the backyard entrance. Impatient and nervous, I do the honors. F these people, they can't make you stay, let's get the F out of here. At that moment, one of my friends I came with, who was being blocked by the neighbor, decided he'd had enough. All I saw was him come flying through the backyard entrance and knock the silly out of the guy blocking the exit. That opened the floodgates. In about 15 seconds, the house was cleared. I was pulling away as the kid who owned the house decides to say, "Screw it," and bailed. I gave him a fighting chance and popped my trunk. At the time, I had an old Ford Explorer. He jumped into the trunk, slammed the door behind him, and screams, "Go, go, go!" And we were gone. A few years ago, some friends and I were out drinking in downtown Toronto where we all live. We were in a cab going from one bar to another to meet some friends. As the cab driver pulls up to our destination, my friend, who's sitting in the driver's side back seat, opens his door just as a streetcar, sort of like a mini train for public transit like they have in San Francisco, was going by. The front corner of the streetcar takes the cab door clean off its hinges. The cab driver and streetcar driver both get out and start screaming at each other. No one seems to realize it was actually my friend's fault, so we drop the cab fare plus a generous tip into the driver's seat and quietly exit through the opposite side. I mean, even though you gave him some money, I can't say that you're a great person for this, although I don't know who would come out on top of an insurance fight in this particular case, since you buggered off. I hope the taxi driver didn't get stuck with the bill or thousands for the repair. Oof. In 2005, I was traveling in China after taking a year off after high school. I'd already been all over Japan, Australia, Southeast Asia, and China was the last place I was visiting before coming home. I flew into Beijing and decided to spend about a week there before heading on. So it's about 3 days in and I'm walking through Tiananmen Square on my way somewhere when these two Asian girls ask me to hold a camera and get a picture. Now, something you have to know is that there is, or at least there was this thing where Chinese girls or sometimes guys would come up to tourists and try and get them to go with them to some phony art exhibit or something and pressure them to buy some overpriced piece of crap. I'd seen this kind of thing before and just stayed clear. But this time the same red flags weren't going off. One of the girls spoke near-perfect English and the other girl's was passable. And after a minute or two of chatting, there was no mention of any of the usual scam stuff, so I figured they must be legit. We continued chatting and eventually wandered around the area for a bit. Then, after about an hour, one of the girls suggested that we go to a karaoke place. Karaoke was pretty popular across Asia at the time, but it isn't done like karaoke is in North America. In Japan, at least, you rent a small room with a karaoke machine. The price of the room included a few drinks, but you could also order more from a menu. So we got to this place, and then the red flags start going off. First thing I see when we get to it is that it's some kind of restaurant. But although it's the middle of the dinner rush, it's completely empty, save for a couple of guys in cheap suits, sitting around a table not eating or drinking. Keep in mind that this is less than a dozen blocks from the Forbidden Palace, so you'd think it would be a little more crowded. Frick, I think. Then we get led into a back room with a big banquet table and one tiny TV with the world's crappiest karaoke machine hooked up to it, and I got handed this drink menu, where the prices are crazy high, like high enough to include things besides drinks. So I start thinking that chances are pretty good that this is a place for working girls, and chances are also pretty good that if I don't buy anything, I'm going to be robbed and forced to empty my debit card. Luckily, I keep a cool head and start to think of ways out of there. Fortunately, on the way into this back room to the door, the bathroom was open and I could see that there was a window big enough for me to fit through that was cracked open. I was sitting there 98% sure that I was about to be robbed and decided that the bathroom is the best bet out of there. So I say I have to use the bathroom, leave enough money to cover the one drink that I ordered, it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and surreptitiously grab my backpack and head to the washroom. I then proceed to throw my bag out through the window and squeeze myself through after it. After that, I took off running as fast as I could and caught the first cab that I could see half a block down and sweated bullets all the way back to my hostel. I found out later that something similar happened to a friend of mine who was traveling in Turkey. He met a fellow backpacker who suggested that they go out for a drink, and when they got there, the drinks were way overpriced. Turns out that the different drinks were covers for different types of bedroom acts with working girls, which apparently the other guy knew but neglected to mention. When my friend realized this, he tried to leave but was held up by a couple of guys and forced to withdraw as much as he could from an ATM. He ended up having to have his parents wire him money so that he could get home. In short, escaped from being robbed in a foreign country by diving out of a bathroom window. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There is a racial slur that begins with N. We've replaced it with the word jigger in the 2 times it appears in this story. Anyways, some friends and I left a club in Boston one night and were pretty well lubricated by then. 2 of my friends were running down the middle of the road looking for an open cab when one of them stops at a minivan and taps on the passenger side window. In the van were 4 large black guys, which my friends slurringly asked to give us a ride. The guy in the passenger seat responded with, "Yeah, but we roll hard. You roll hard?" At this point, my friend screams to me, "Yo, it's cool. My jiggers are going to give us a ride." At that point, I decided it was time to leave, so I grabbed my friend and told him to keep walking, but he yelled, "But I want to do some smack with my jiggers." Then I decided it was really time to leave. When I was 16, I was at the mall with a friend of mine who was telling me horrible, horrible stories about her friend. We turned a corner just as I exclaimed, "That's disgusting," really, really loudly. All 100 pounds of me suddenly noticed a very tall, very overweight man sitting on a bench with his equally overweight child attached to one of those leashes they used to have for kids. Well, he looks me right in the eye and says, "What's disgusting, huh?" and proceeds to stand up and come menacingly at me. I tried to explain that it was the story my friend was talking about, but he was having none of it. I booked it out of there really quickly and still felt really badly about the whole situation, as I could only imagine what he thought I'd been talking about. I was out for drinks with a friend of mine and a guy from work. The guy from work had a hard time controlling his drinking, so by the time we got to the sake place, I told him he was cut off. He was falling over at this point. At one point, he goes to the bathroom, and when he comes back, he's clutching his hand for some reason. I'm like, "Mike, what happened to your hand?" And he answered, I hurt it somehow. I might have broken the sink too." Oh crap. I like this place. Cheap beer, sake, and appetizers. So I go to check the bathroom. No damage. Phew. This place is one of those tiny Asian restaurants with 2 one-person bathrooms, male and female. I sit back down and said, "Mike, guy's room looks fine. Maybe you damaged the faucet somehow." His answer was, "Oh, no. I was in the girls' room." So I check the girls' bathroom. Devastation. Apparently he slipped on the wet floor, caught himself on the sink, and ripped this entire beautiful porcelain sink off the wall. It was the kind where water runs around in circles before it gets to your hands. All that's left is a glued-on cross-section of a sink on the wall and a pile of porcelain pieces on the floor with a metal faucet sticking up out of them. As a bonus, there was blood everywhere. Even the toilet looks pink. In the words of my friend, it looked like New York City was less one working girl that night. Apparently he cut his hand on the sink and it sprayed everywhere as he fell. I tended to Mike's hand while my other friend started discreetly mopping up the blood trail that leads from the girls' room to our table with his shoes. A pile of blood is forming under Mike. Meantime, the owners realize what's happening, and upon seeing this disaster, what do? Nothing. They pretend nothing happened. No cops, just mops. I immediately demand the check, citing as my reason for leaving that I no longer feel well, which was half true by that point. I did not return to my favorite sake bomb place for months. In short, Drunken coworker destroys public bathroom, creating a bloody mess, and I discreetly exit. This is not what most of us mean when we warn our friends that we're going to destroy their bathrooms. Such a wild thing to be on everyone's mind in the break room the next Monday. This is why we only drink with colleagues at our own peril. When I was a dumb preteen kid, a friend and I were screwing around and decided it would be fun to throw eggs at cars. We positioned ourselves at the end of an alley that dead-ended on a small hill that overlooked a fairly busy street, but didn't connect to it. We figured it was the perfect spot, because we were higher up than the streets, and a car couldn't get to us without going around the block. Plus, there weren't any streetlights nearby. After hitting a few cars with eggs, we truly unleashed on one car. A couple of eggs in each hand. We'd probably hit that windshield with 4 or 5 eggs at once. That's when the red and blue lights on the roof of that car came on. Because there were no streetlights nearby, we didn't realize it was a frickin' cop car. We hauled butt while the cop car sped around the block trying to get to our alley. Luckily, my buddy's house was just down said alley, and we ducked inside before the cop found us. He circled the neighborhood for half an hour, shining his spotlight into yards. In short, don't throw eggs at cop cars. My friend and I were on our way to a different town for some drinks with a friend of ours. It's a drive, probably like 45 minutes. Anyway, we were passing a big old roll of Mary J back and forth by the time we hit the city limits, and pulled up next to this guy driving an old RWD V8. You know the one I'm talking about. Brown, rust spots, big engine that's not quite in tune, but when you put it down, the tires on the thing will still scream. It's about 11 p.m. and we're parked at a four-way with woods behind us, and the town is in front of us, with 2 streets sitting perpendicular to us. Anyway, he looked over at us and revs the engine. I'm driving a Jeep, so I tap the gas and jokingly nod over at him, like we're gonna do this thing. Stoplight turns green and he hits it hard. I stay parked and just watch him with my mouth open and the number still in my hand. The guy starts fishtailing all over the road, goes really far right, overcorrects, left past the double yellow line, almost hits another car which swerves out of his way, overcorrects back over the double yellow line really hard, jumps the curb on the right side of the street and plows directly into a storefront's giant plate glass window. Glass just showered all over that car. The guy throws the car in reverse, sprayed landscaped bushes all over the inside of the building he'd inadvertently entered, backs up into a street sign, then burns out down the road. The car that had swerved to avoid him whips a U-turn and chases after him as well. By then, the light had turned red, and I turned to my friend and honestly asked him if I'd hallucinated the entire thing. He said, no, that definitely happened. When we left our buddies at about 3 a.m., there were cops everywhere, taping off the building and digging around in the bushes. I thought about stopping them and telling them what happened, but I just decided it wasn't worth possibly getting arrested. A young 16-year-old me invited to a house party in a nearby town. A nice place, but the party was populated by a bit more of an alternative crowd than the younger me had grown up with. There was a band playing terrible music in the living room, kids hitting up pipes in the host's mother's bedroom, nowhere near enough room for all the folk that had decided that this was the place to be that Friday evening. Eventually, it all spilled out into the streets. A friend who'd accompanied me that night was spotted being led by one of the local emo-looking girls out onto the field across from the house. He was a perennial geek amongst geeks, this guy. This was just not his style, but he liked her, so we left him to it. We all knew he was about to get lucky, and we were happy for him, albeit in a field in northwest of England. Ah, what a place to lose it. Bless him. After the fact, we all met up again upstairs, passing around a big old spliff and high-fiving. The next thing we know, music is off, folk are shouting, and footsteps are getting louder. Lots of them. It turned out the girl was supposed to be with the lead singer of the band, who in turn happened to be the host. And one of her friends had decided that she was being just a little bit too much of a working girl. Door swings open, we drop the devil's lettuce to the deck, and all turn in shock as a long-haired, greasy black metal fan attempts to decimate each of us with his Ibanez. We pushed him to the ground, barged our way down the stairs and out the front door. Having thought we were clear of danger now, we call a taxi to pick us up. Having been quiet for about 5 minutes, we decide everything is fine. Close call. In actual fact, the offended vocalist had spent his 5 minutes getting troops and a hunting pack together in a fashion I find reminiscent of Age of Empires army building. They spotted us walking down the road and decided to make chase. We spotted our taxi and decided to make haste. We made it, just in time, safe in the taxi with the locks on the door. The taxi driver saw my lips move but couldn't make out what I was saying over all the banging on the windows. But he eventually clicked on. In that moment, I was Jack frickin' Bauer screaming, "Get us the frick out of here!" When I was 19, a couple of friends and I decided to go to this bar that had opened up not too far away. It was the kind of place that didn't card and we wanted drinks. We got there and one of the guys I was with was carrying a pocket knife. The bouncer told him he couldn't take it in, so he left it with the girl at the front. Well, after an hour, we start to realize just how shady this place is, so we decide to leave. As we're walking out, the guy realizes he needs to get his knife back, so he goes back inside. My other friend and I are just sitting outside the door waiting when we hear an argument break out about 20 feet away. After some shouting back and forth in Spanish between the parties, we hear shots. At that point, we both roadie run to my truck and duck behind the tires. A few seconds later, the other guy we were with shows up and we get the heck out of there. A few months later, the whole place was shut down due to a police investigation involving gangs and people being chopped up in the basement. In short, went to a bar, shots fired, pieced the ever-loving frick out.
What's the smallest amount of power you've seen go to someone's head? Public school bus driver for a poor farming area, middle school aged. We weren't allowed to talk, even at a murmur. Turn our heads, read, or do homework. The ride was an hour each way. Any infractions, he would pull over and scream at us, and usually give any kids involved and whoever was next to them a multiple-day bus ban. Rural, poor area from the school meant a lot of kids just couldn't go to school those days. Our bus was always late because he pulled over 4 to 5 times a day. He would make personal stops to his home because F you, that's why. 20 years later, and still a hard contender for biggest loser I've ever met. I'm just picturing this one loser bus driver, impacting the entire education of this rural area. I mean, usually I feel bad for bus drivers or just about anyone that has to deal with the public in some capacity, and not this time. This guy just sounds like he really, really, really sucks. I worked at Blockbuster. One of the employees, Melanie, got a key holder promotion over me. We didn't really like each other, but it wasn't a blood feud. One day, the manager calls me to sub in for someone who called out sick. It's my day off. I'm at college and don't have my uniform. I tell the manager this and she says I need a body here to work the register. Come in naked. Just get here ASAP. I show up in normal clothes and I've been working with another key holder for about 6 hours. Melanie comes in to rent something because it's her day off and flips the F out. She goes back to the office and proceeds to write me up for failing to comply to dress code and so on. She then proceeds to try and make me sign it then and there, all while off the clock. She's still hourly. She does this for the next 2 hours until the store closes. No dice. I tell her to sit and spin on it. Manager comes in the next morning to a crap storm. Melanie gets written up for working off the clock, tells her I acted on a direct order from her, and she needs to get off her frickin' high horse. Alright, so I was a PA, production assistant, the lowest of the low on a film set, for a Kelsey Grammer submarine comedy called Down Periscope. One guy was giving the meaningless title of Key PA and decided he was going to help wrangle background extras for this big exterior shot we're working on. Now, everyone, including the extras, knew that the camera was probably framed in a medium close-up on the principal actors who were doing a scene way down at the end of the dock. Nonetheless, Key PA guy took it upon himself to start blocking out whole entire scenes of these background extras. I'm talking crowds of people. You guys over there, your families of the sailors who haven't seen your husbands in 6 months and you run from the bus to the fence, but you guys are cadets who get in the way and you guys are arguing about which car has the right of way. Then all you kids start clapping because you see a big doggy pulling his owner so fast he trips over the leash. Like second unit on a Michael frickin' Bay movie. He had these people doing this made-up little scene over and over and over. He'd yell at them, tell them they did it wrong and reset them back to 1 to start over. Madness. I walked by the guy and noticed this was going on and said, the camera is pointed the other direction, right? He just laughed and said, I know. Software developer here. We had a guy appointed as the change manager in charge of enforcing controls and coding standards. He was not a programmer. He would regularly reject changes because he didn't like how variables were named. Like he would want cust count renamed to CSTMRCNT. Sounds kind of petty and like he felt like he had to do something, so he was just like, no, I don't like that, change it. When I played Halo 2, I joined a fairly large clan that had some pretty cool people in it. We did a lot together together, and every once in a while they would elect a new forum moderator/officer to run the ranks. One day they elect this kid who sounded like he was 11 to be a new officer. He seemed pretty down to earth, but the very next day he gets home from school and starts kicking every single person from the clan who just even slightly brushed him the wrong way. It was so bad that the leader, who was on vacation in Hawaii, had to log on a library computer in order to strip all powers from this kid. The kid's reasoning was that he didn't get picked for a baseball game at school and was angry the rest of the day. Which is why you don't give children power, because they have no idea how to communicate their feelings or separate their emotions from one situation to their emotions in another situation. Years ago, while working in a pizza place, our manager had to leave on a family emergency and left a girl in charge until one of the other shift runners could get there. He lived about 45 minutes away, and in that 45 minutes, this girl who was left in charge actually called one of her friends and hired her, saying she was the manager now, wrote me up for putting too much cheese on a pizza, and actually told one of the drivers he was fired because she didn't like his attitude. When the shift runner got there to take over, this girl also told him not to worry about it, and she had things under control. End result, her friend was not hired, my write-up for using too much cheese was torn up, the fired driver, who never left the parking lot, kept his job, and she quit a few days later because we were unprofessional and the manager played favorites. I lived in a village for a few months, and one of the richer farmers' wives got the job of running the community center. She put out a big placard with a picture of herself and titled herself CEO, as well as on business cards. Started wearing business suits and banning people she didn't like the look of. The building was the size of a small apartment and hosted a knitting and Bible club for senior citizens. Used to work with a group of interns in an office, and for some reason I still don't understand, they decided to promote one of us over the others. Their job was basically just to schedule who was doing what and when. That's it. Only took 2 weeks before we found out she was keeping detailed notes on all of our mistakes and taking them to upper management. They promptly told her to calm the F down and decided to do away with the position. She made a lot of enemies that day. She had ambitions of working at the company and was trying to make us all look bad. I think that one may have backfired on her. My favorite power trip was from one of my students. I had placed my kids in groups for a big project and gave them the option to elect their leader for each group. I intentionally placed all the quiet kids together, thinking nobody would overpower their ideas. I was so wrong. Vincent was elected leader because none of the other quiet kids wanted the responsibility, and he immediately became a despot, controlling whether they were allowed to ask me questions, giving assignments and dictating the exact outcome, loudly berating his teammates if a drawn picture was even millimeters off center. I want you to understand that before this, Vincent would hardly raise his voice when I made him answer questions for the class. After a day of guiding him toward better leadership strategies, I came in like the goddamn US Marines and deposed him, but better than the US because I facilitated the next election. The students decided no joint power between two entities, so no single person would let the power go to their head. It would have been a great teachable moment for checks and balances, but we were studying anthropology, so I let it go and always looked sideways at Vincent after that. There's always some shy, weak person that's waiting for an opportunity to grab a power and then abuse it. I mean, this is literally why I've always said don't trust people that do their utmost best to appear absolutely harmless. A girl I worked with was promoted to assistant manager at a Little Caesars because she was the only one there that was 18. She went from an okay worker to not doing anything and making my time there a living hell. I eventually quit and was asked to come back after she was fired. 5 years later, I got a random Facebook message from her apologizing for being such a douche during that time. I once worked part-time doing inventory. We would go to stores like the Bay, Whole Foods, and literally count everything on the shelves with our fancy, dancy machines. This one man was given leadership of the home section. Now, he wasn't actually given any management power, made the same amount as everyone else, all that. Just literally, he was told, okay, you and these people are going to the home section, divvy it up however. He went full power trip mode, micromanaging how I counted towels, patrolling the aisles, watching us all, yelling unnecessarily. From that day on, he was known as King Tut. That reminds me when I worked with this guy called Ivan. I think he was from Bermuda or something like that. He was okay, but he was like weirdly demanding and insistent that his way be the way that everyone worked, and I called him Ivan the Terrible. The upperclassmen at my university would proctor exams the freshmen would take. I wasn't there for this, but my friend tells me the story of how he and Lewis were the two proctors while the professor was in the office down the hall. Apparently, in an effort to prevent cheating, Lewis brought a clipboard and noted when and where each student went to the bathroom. Where, meaning that he would force students to use different bathrooms. The justification being that I suppose they could leave secret notes or something? So once the bathroom on the 1st, 2nd, and 8th floor each had one person go there, he made a kid use a bathroom in the building next to ours. Kid complains to the other proctor, who grabs the professor, who kicks Lewis from the job. Lewis, I know you use Reddit, and I know you might see this, and I'm sure you'll figure out who I am. You're a frickin' C-word. You know, I don't know about this one. I think Lewis is being kind of smart, to be honest. I mean, still unreasonable, but still smart. Probably to my own head, when I was about 8 years old, I was asked by the teacher, because I was being a well-behaved little boy, to stand by the whiteboard while she was talking about something and write the names of people who were talking and acting out on the board. I went mad with power and wrote people's names down who just looked at me funny. In elementary school, I was on the safety patrol, which basically meant that I stood at the busy intersection alongside an adult crossing guard, and when he went into the street to stop traffic, I would let the little kids know it was safe to cross. I also told other kids not to run, etc. Well, one day, a girl, a grade below me, walked up the hill from elementary school to the intersection, instead of taking the stairs. So I grabbed her by the arm and marched her back to the stairs and told her she had to take the stairs. Proto-fascist right here. I got in trouble for it. Girl I was waitressing with, just us two, was going to be a manager, but wasn't a manager yet. She flipped out because I had a contraction and sat down a minute, screamed in front of patrons that she was my supervisor, she was better than me, and if I didn't like it, I could effing leave. I clocked out and quit on the spot. The captain, aka coach's kid on my 4th grade hockey team, ran into him in high school, and we were trying to figure out where we knew each other from. I eventually said, "Oh, you were on my hockey team in 4th grade." His response years later, "Your hockey team? Wow, that's funny. It was my hockey team." Honestly, I just think that's a hilarious response. My friend is the co-maid of honor in her sister's destination wedding. Her sister and her sister's fiancé are great friends of mine, and my friend and her husband are even closer, and she thinks she can control people's plans and arrangements. For example, I booked the resort through Amex instead of the room block, and months after booking, she is still fighting me about it. The bride and groom don't give a frick and have told me they would have done the same thing. My younger sister got an Xbox 360 some years ago on Christmas. Whenever my younger sister or I would ask to play, she would boss us around first, but ultimately deny us. Get me some juice first, bring me some snacks, make my bed. Me and my younger sister were just like, "Can we play now?" "No, you shouldn't have trusted me. Female dog." I had an older brother, I know that feeling, the whole you do the things that they ask you and then they literally turn around and go, "You shouldn't have trusted me." I'm pretty sure, yeah, they literally did that to me once and I was seething. I have a big group of friends who go to the local park on a regular basis and play outdoor games and board games. I bought a set of lawn darts as well as numerous other games. We were deliberately in a part of the park where no other people were around for at least 100 meters. The patrol drove up in a little cart. This fussy man got out, hooked his thumbs into his belt loops and shambles over to me like a Western cartoon character. The only thing he was missing was hay in his teeth and a hat to tip back. He tried to confiscate my lawn darts as they posed a danger to the public. I pointed out there was no public around outside of our group. Then he went with the line that the little lady was using them incorrectly and posing a danger to myself. I was 38 at the time and I am 5'10". I towered over his little diminutive self, and lady is not the first word I would use to describe myself. I asked him on whose authority he was confiscating my games and to show me the bylaw that allowed this. I even pulled out my phone to look up the park rules. He started to get flustered, and by this point my friends were openly laughing at his routine. He backed off and drove away. Later that day, when one of us made a complaint at the office, we learned he was actually the park maintenance man, garbage collector, and had zero authority. He wasn't even supposed to be driving that particular vehicle. Was the garbage collector douchey? Yes, but do you also sound like a douche? In my humble opinion, yes, but only when they start ragging on the person's size and stuff. They can't help that. My boss recently found out that he's related to Michelle Obama. He bragged about it all day. Self-roast. When I was in second grade, we played a class maths game that included some quick mental thinking. There was a prize, the big digit timer, that was literally a timer or clock my teacher had probably gotten from the supermarket. It took most of the year for someone to finally win it, that person being me. Cut to a week later, and when someone insulted me, my go-to response of, "Yeah, well, I won the big digit timer and you didn't." Literally a frickin' timer. That's just another one that I find really funny. My boyfriend has his name on the title of the house next to his father's. My boyfriend and I live in a house that his dad bought for him so he could avoid dorm living. His sisters were living with us while they attended school with him, and they still drop by whenever they need to, and they're allowed to just walk in whenever. His dad shows up whenever he wants and needs to as well. Yet my boyfriend will get on the mic on his games, and when his friends start talking mad crap, he just goes, "Well, at least I own my own house." "Yeah, but I have my own house. I'm going to college and I own a house. We can't afford to pay rent. His dad is paying for us to live here and buying our groceries. His dad also takes care of 100% of all the problems that happen with the house and whatnot. His dad technically owns the car my boyfriend drives. He has not paid for anything. Hell, I've paid more in rent and other expenses in total than he has." My daughter in 5th grade, when they gave her a safety patrol badge, oh my god, it was awful. We called her Paul Blart behind her back. She wasn't as incompetent as he was, but to say that she was taking her job seriously was an understatement. That just sounds cute. So, I'm not proud of this, that needs to be said. In high school, my boyfriend slid into home base, literally, this is not an innuendo, and sacrificed his ankle for a home run. I drove him to the emergency room, and when his mom arrived, I volunteered to go get food to escape her and feed his teammates. While waiting for my pizza at a nearby joint, the kind with games and crap for kids, I decided it would be so cool if I brought toppings with me. I was known as a bit of a rule follower, so I thought snagging the glass pepper and cheese shakers would make me look cool. I don't know, it was frickin' stupid. So I casually put them in my purse and internally applaud myself for being such a rebel. Then it happens. "Miss, are you stealing those?" I turn around to see a kid who was probably my age but seemed much more authoritative in that moment, looking rather indignant. He pointedly grabs my purse and gazes at the contraband, then looks at me with true disdain. I mean, you'd think there were dead kittens in that bag. He then proceeds to lecture me about theft. I was scared at first, my first criminal act was not going well, but then he starts talking about these condiments like they're housed in his great Nana's priceless glass cheese and pepper shakers. He starts threatening legal action, and now I'm mortified. I break a rule and my first ever police report will say, "Stole cheese." After several minutes of the sternest talking to ever be given by a mother frickin' busboy, the manager comes strolling by. The kid stops him to tell him what I've done. He is glowing with self-righteousness, like this act is one that will finally show his worth. They may let him run the ticket counter, or dare I say, work the actual register due to his courageous act of stopping yet another thief from taking red pepper flakes. Well, he was wrong. The manager looks at him, and with all the passion that can be mustered by a middle-aged man managing a pizza chain with skee-ball machines, he shrugs and says, "Okay, did you get them back?" Busboy proudly holds the sacred objects for his manager to see, nods the affirmative, and waits for his praise. The praise does not come. His manager simply shrugs again and mumbles, "Okay." Busboy is bruised, but not broken. He then enthusiastically suggests to the manager that the authorities be called and charges be filled so that I may be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This woke his manager up a bit. His eyes widened and he looks at the busboy and asks, "Are you insane? You got the shakers back. We are done here." It was a hit for sure. Busboy is shocked. This is simply not how he saw this playing out. He thought this was his ticket out of cleaning puke out of the ball pit, but no. As he suffered through what I'm sure were flashbacks of the weekend of 8-year-old birthday party soda experiments and the mess those make, I realized that I was never in danger. This busboy was riding so high on the perceived power bestowed upon him by his pizza overlords, I had been scared. But he had no power. here. As he regained composure and tried to save face by letting me off with a stern warning, I just laughed. I took my pizza and no condiments, and I left. I'm pleased that I do not have a police record, even more so that I don't have one that mentions Parmesan cheese, all because of the power-crazed busboy in history. Some people gotta really stop and think, am I being a total Jobsworth about this? Like, yeah, they were right to grab them and be like, no, don't steal the shakers, but then they just took it to a whole nother level that it didn't need to be taken to whatsoever. Like, yeah, don't let people steal from you, full stop. It sets a bad example, and people think you're weak. Man was trying to go above and beyond and just ended up looking like a fool. I bussed for a month at a restaurant before being promoted, but during that time, one of the managers would use the busboys as her personal assistants. She would have us do the small jobs she had to do while bussing. She also asked us the same way every time. Could you pretty please get me ice? Could you pretty please carry the boxes for me? Could you pretty please go get my food for me? She was older and had no husband, but desperately wanted a rich guy, and she also had a wild booger sugar addiction. I work at a big factory as the lowest level of manager, 5th level. Sometimes I work in projects with a guy in 2nd level management. He steps up to location manager, 1st level. Whenever our location manager is away. One day while working on a project, our location manager was away, and the guy I worked with had to leave in a minor emergency, water leak at home. He made me sign a document really quick, gave me a phone, and left. After reading the document, I quickly realized I was acting location manager. I went down a level to 3rd level management to visit my boss's boss and told him he was doing a good job and to keep it up. Priceless look on faces ensued. I don't know why, but I really thought that this was going to go in the direction of, so as acting location manager, I then handed off the position to the next guy beneath me and effed off to do something that I wanted to do, like visit someone or do something or go somewhere. I just today watched an 18-year-old kid get forklift certified while loading up trucks. He got the nerve to start barking orders at a senior staff, including myself, and hastily was revoked of his license. He didn't say a word as he left work today. My 5-year-old won the kindergarten Olympics. He was a complete butthead for about a week. When I worked at McDonald's, a teenager was made temporary assistant manager for a little under an hour and threatened to send 3 people home. That guy got his hours cut real quick. Twitch mods, it's hilarious. They can be given mod for no reason, and they are so stupid they actually think they are like a law enforcer. Young teens being given the power to ban people at will, and you can actually feel the inflation and narcissism. It's hilarious. Forklift certified? Well, that's your problem right there, don't you know? Getting forklift certification can corrupt you even faster than the one ring to rule them all. It takes a very special person to wield that kind of power. Lawyers, what's a case you regretted winning? I'm a work comp attorney, now represent injured people, but used to work on other side insurance defense. There was an applicant with a serious injury, fell off a ladder, busted back with fusion, shoulder screwed. Years of treatment, internal issues, psych issues, really just messed up. 50% plus permanent disability. We were 5 years in and finally getting to settlement time. If we bought out his future medical settlement pretty far into 6 figures, this guy was the sole provider for wife and 2 kids. Then we found out he had aggressive brain cancer. Expected only a couple of years to live at best. Thus, we wouldn't buy out future medical anymore. Still got permanent disability for $60K-ish, but can't give medical buyout based on 25-plus year life expectancy anymore. I felt terrible for the guy and his family. Me and the adjuster tried to get insurance to agree to some sort of amount like 5-year buyout, but the bean counter said hell no. The attorney knew it wasn't me making the decision. Even though he worked on that guy's file for 5+ years, he decided to take $0 in fees. I have so much respect for that attorney turning down $10K plus in fees to help his client in a very crappy situation. Yeah, I can't lie, if I were a lawyer on the other side of that, I'd probably be laying awake at night thinking about that guy and his family. And clearly this guy does. I do family law, and I represented a father who had lost most of his custody from illegal substance use and imprisonment as a result. He came to me saying he was clean and doing good and had his life together, and it checked out. He had been clean for almost 9 months, not counting jail time, and seemed sincere in wanting to resume a full relationship with his son. The other side fought viciously to keep him in extremely little custody, and supervised at that, but we prevailed and got an order restoring family frequent unsupervised partial custody. custody. Not long afterwards, only about 3 months after the case, he was back to doing illegal substances, sold most of his furniture, and for me the most soul-crushing is that he set up a fake GoFundMe stuff for his child's cancer. His child didn't have cancer and has never had cancer, so you know where that money was going. I withdrew my appearance at this point, so I don't know what happened afterwards, but I imagine and hope his custody was taken away. Basically, the net result of winning that case was that the poor boy had to witness his father relapse onto illegal substances and was exploited for money. Worst case I ever won. I work in medical malpractice defense. Once I had an obstetrician or gynecologist who burned a patient during a procedure. When I met with the doctor, he lied to me throughout the representation over 16 months, saying he had no idea how it happened. There is a doctrine in law called res ipsa, meaning absent some sort of negligence. This accident could not have occurred. Woman came in without a burn, and after the procedure, the woman left with a burn. There's no way this doctor didn't know what had happened. The area of the burn was where he was operating on. It wasn't until I brought up settlement, because this was not a case we could win, did he say, "Oh, maybe I do know what happened." We ultimately settled that case, which is considered a favorable outcome considering the potential high monetary verdict. Sometimes I think this doctor really ought to have lost that case and their license. I wouldn't say I regret this so much as to this day it amazes me. As a first-year associate, I was given a terrible PI case where my client received a flu shot and thereafter felt pain in his shoulder. He went to another doctor who performed an MRI and determined he had a torn rotator cuff, which was undoubtedly not related. My job was to allege the flu shot caused the rotator cuff tear. Our author actually correlated the two, which is the more regrettable position, and the case paid out. Being the bottom of the totem pole, I had no choice but to take the case, which was handed down by a partner, but at the same time just overwhelmingly made me feel like the worst stereotyped attorney and just hated having to walk into court on it and feel my reputation being destroyed. I'm just picturing this dude walking in court and be like, "Your Honor, I feel offended because this is just so stereotypical evil lawyer. I don't want to be that guy. Is it fair that I go through years of school and training to get to this specific job only to be stereotyped so callously?" I do juvenile work, criminal law and family law. I represented this client first when he was a juvenile charged with disorderly conduct at school and fighting. Then, when he became an adult, it was for simple things like possession of the devil's lettuce. As he got older, it became easier and easier to figure out what part of his life hasn't gone as well as it could, and I tried to counsel him and push him to better himself. He got his GED, he started going to NA, he started classes at a community college and found a part-time job. On the night of his 21st birthday, he was charged with a DWI. Of course, I'll take care of that too. About 6 months later, we are due in for court for a trial on a Monday, and he doesn't show up, which at this point in his life is highly unusual. As I'm trying to figure out where he is, the court starts going over arraignments, first appearances, and then, lo and behold, 3 people are up for murder charges. The prosecution starts to tell the judge what the facts and circumstances of the case are and mentions a few victims' names. Apparently, my client was at a party when these 3 individuals decided to allegedly do a drive-by. My client suffered from multiple wounds and didn't make it to the hospital. So, by default, as you can't prosecute a dead person, the state has to take a dismissal. I guess technically a win. Either way, it was crushing to me as I thought he had really turned his life around. As a personal injury attorney, I've seen a few clients with the blue-collar lotto or getting more money than they reasonably know how to deal with. I do my best to educate them, but my job is to try and maximize their recovery, not to teach them finance, and I have definitely contributed to a few illegal substance habits. In one of my first cases after passing the bar exam, a young man retained me on a drunk driving charge. No one was hurt, but he totaled his car. During trial, the arresting police officer testified that my client was clearly drunk at the accident scene and that my client was loudly blaming the accident on a freaking butthole who stole his car, crashed it, and then fled before the cops arrived. However, according to the 2 other witness statements tendered into evidence, it was my client's friend, the passenger, who was screaming about the butthole who stole the car, not my client, the driver. The cop must have confused the 2 men during his testimony. This discrepancy raised a reasonable doubt in the judge's mind, so she acquitted my client. At the time, the acquittal was somewhat unexpected for me. In my personal view, my client was clearly drunk and responsible for the accident, regardless of who was blaming the mystery butthole to the cops. But I was happy my client got off. No one was hurt, and lessons were learned. And I was quite euphoric to have won my first criminal case. The regret? About a month after the acquittal, my young client called me at 3 a.m. from the police station saying, "It's me again. The police arrested me for drunk driving again. Can you help me?" Not only did I answer no, I instantly regretted getting the earlier acquittal. My client apparently didn't learn any lessons. You can't save everybody. Some people just can't learn a freaking lesson to save their life. I got a spoiled brat of a teenager cleared of a shoplifting charge when he absolutely had done it. His rich parents hired me to represent him. I did that to the best of my ability, and we went to trial and won, but I can't say I felt good about it. This kid needed to be taught some accountability for his actions, and his parents just wanted to buy their way out of any trouble he got into. Had this happened to me twice. Got my client out on bail, only to thereafter have him up and killed. First time, he was in a building, supposedly selling, got chased by the police, and a struggle ensued where he was smoked point blank in the head. Mother told me that it was my fault that he was killed, and that I was working with the DA and the police. Second time, a young man no more than 16 gets released while waiting trial on robbery. One of the conditions of release was that he was to maintain a curfew. That very night, he breaks curfew, goes over to somebody else's house, and was killed in a illegal substance-related robbery. Mother blamed me and said that the devil was working through me, that we were all demons. Criminal defense is a hard business. Did a divorce where the husband, who I was representing, wanted to trade custody of his children for a set of bedroom furniture. The bedroom furniture was not even like a family heirloom. It was furniture that you could probably get at a Rooms to Go or something. Still makes me ill. That's why I got out of family law. I'm picturing that father looking up at the judge and saying, "Your Honor, I love my children with all my heart, truly, but that furniture means the world to me." I won a summary judgment motion that my firm filed not expecting to win. We had a decent argument, but odds were way worse than a coin flip, and judges don't like granting summary judgment because it's an extreme remedy. The client initially was thrilled. Case is over. We tried to break the news gently. Nope. 3 years later, we're back in the same spot we were before. We won our motion. The other side appealed it up to the state Supreme Court and won because the Supreme Court said the trial judge should have denied our motion. So, we're back at square one, north of $100,000 in legal bills with no resolution. Maybe it'll settle, maybe it will go to trial. I'll find out in the next 3 to 4 months. The one I particularly hated happened at my first law job. This woman was a long-term client of my boss. In the past 10 years or so, she has been caught driving under the influences 8 times, violated home incarceration countless times, been caught with controlled substances a few times, and stabbed 2 people on home incarceration. My boss at the time was the master of getting people off for DUIs, so she had only been convicted of a DUI third and always managed to stay on home incarceration with whatever releases she desired. I always regretted her cases because that woman is truly a danger to the public. She's undoubtedly going to kill someone someday, but I'll be damned if she isn't the luckiest woman alive in getting away with DUIs. A little late to the party, but I've got one I still think about a lot. Worked in criminal defense, represented a guy in a DUI. He had priors, so another conviction meant time, loss of license, problems. Long story short, he was pulled over by police after they followed him leaving a bar. At trial, I elicited admission from the arresting officer that during the 2.5 miles he followed him for, he did not observe a single moving violation. No speeding, erratic driving, driving over the lines, blowing stop signs, running red lights, didn't even stop suddenly at red lights. Also got the DRE officer to testify that the accused only spoke Spanish and they couldn't get interpreter officer to the roadside to explain the field sobriety exercises, which the officer documented the accused refused to perform. Jury came back in 15 minutes. Guy was extremely grateful and his lovely family was very gracious in thanking me and our office. Feel good about the whole thing. A couple months later, I'm in county to meet with a client, and I see him in one of the pods. Find out sometime after the trial, he violently and sexually assaulted his stepdaughter. I think about that one a lot. There was this case I saw that involved a claim with free shifting, meaning that if the plaintiff won, their attorney's fees would get paid by the defendant. defendant pushed an aggressive legal position at trial that the judge agreed with and won, avoiding a few thousand in liability to the plaintiff and a few thousand in attorney fees. So far, so good. But then the plaintiff appeals all the way to the state's High Court, requiring a ton of briefing and time. High Court agrees with plaintiff, reserves and sends back to the trial court, which now enters judgment against the defendant for a few thousand in damages against the plaintiff and tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees from the appeal. The defense lawyer probably regretted winning at first on that aggressive argument to the trial court. This is honestly making me realize that court, law and order, all this crap is way more complicated than proving your client's innocence or, the other person's guilt, whatever. I mean, hell, I've always known that you can have a bent jury that are just really one-sided in their opinion on basically whatever the heck they want to feel like on any given thing, whether it be race, politics, or anything of the sort, sympathy even. God, I would hate to be a lawyer. This probably won't be the best answer, but this is a real one. After law school, I had to turn down a criminal defense job offer because my wife got a better offer somewhere else. So basically, I followed her along and was desperate to find something after 3 months of fruitless efforts. I would take just about any job that required a JD, whereas literally the only thing I ever wanted to do was criminal defense. 3 months after moving, I got an interview for a real estate litigation job. They hired me the next day. Looking back, that was probably red flag number 1. First day on the job, they taught me how to foreclose on a claim line. These are 2 things I had never heard of before. Turns out it is totally brainless work if you have the right forms. Mind-numbingly boring, basically just cutting and pasting new addresses and amounts owed. So anyways, it took me about 2 months to realize this when I had my first set of hearings. But literally my sole purpose at the firm, which represented over 100 homeowners associations, was to take people's houses away for not paying their homeowners association dues. After my first set of foreclosures, I actually slipped into a pretty legitimate depression. I was getting paid peanuts to drive nearly an hour to work every day to do work I despised on behalf of people I literally could not pretend to care about. The straw on the camel's back was when I started signing the foreclosure and realized I was that guy, I understand someone has to do the work, I guess. There certainly is a lot of money to be made, but it was not for me. I did that job for 3 months, came home one Friday and told my wife I'd rather be homeless than go back on Monday. By some stroke of luck, I started a stellar criminal defense job within 2 weeks and all of the heartache that has 100% been worth it. I've won a lot of cases. You have to redefine winning and losing when doing criminal defense because sometimes even a particularly juicy plea is a win in my opinion, and never once felt bad about it. For example, I got a guy's plea deal cut from 60 years to 15 years for a string of robberies where the interrogations and confessions were overwhelmingly unconstitutional. Like the interrogations were textbook how not to do an interrogation, Missouri versus Siebert, and stuff like that. Never lost sleep over someone not going to jail. So yeah, every case where I took someone's house away, probably 24 times for not paying HOA fees, generally $4,000 or less, was the worst case I ever won. F HOAs. Well, that's my humble opinion. I just think lawyers are kind of scummy overall. Family law is a little different in that you never really win per se. You may get more favorable rulings or better terms, but unless the opposing party did something illegal or mind-bogglingly stupid, it's never a decisive win, really. Although I did have a case where my client fought really hard for the dog and then ended up turning him over to a shelter. Frickin' douchebag. The ex-wife received an anonymous tip and was able to get him back quickly. Yeah, I feel like any couple that's having a messy divorce is usually like, how can I hurt them? Oh, I'll take their pet that they love and adore and then get rid of them immediately or put them down. And it's utterly unnecessary in my opinion. I know a lawyer who had a divorce file a long time ago where she represented the husband, and the husband fought and fought and fought for this painting that the wife's mother had gifted them. It wasn't valuable or anything, but it was a gift from her deceased mother, and he would not settle without it. So she acquiesced and delivered the painting to her lawyer, who delivered it to the husband's lawyer for him to pick up. He never did. It's still sitting in the lawyer's office after years, unless she's tossed it by now. He didn't want the painting, he just didn't want her to have it. Summer of 2018, 2018, I get work regarding what seemed, from the client's description, as a pretty drawn-out and messy divorce case. The husband was my client, and he seemed very adamant that his soon-to-be ex-wife was after every penny he had. Given he seemed to have a fairly high-paying job, it seemed like a pretty common type of case. The city I work in has many instances of this. It has a high cost of living and a lot of well-paid working professionals in private industry. He was a very well-spoken, amicable guy in his late 50s, and truly seemed like he'd been taken by surprise and betrayed by his soon-to-be ex-wife. When I actually got the case, however, I was basically floored. His wife was a working professional as well, worked in government. They'd been married for over 20 years and had 2 kids together and a paid-off house. Before taxes, he made almost 3 times what she did, not counting his stock options, and yet she'd contributed equally to their mortgage on every home they'd owned over the course of the marriage. By all accounts, despite a vast difference in income, she'd carried her weight, raised 2 kids, and worked full-time during the entirety of the marriage. I live and work in Canada. She could have easily raked him over the coals in the divorce if it had gone to court. Instead, it seemed like she'd done everything she possibly could to not have him subjected to that. This divorce had been ongoing for 5 years before he hired me, and it was basically him looking a gift horse in the mouth over and over, with constant renegotiation on the contract they'd both signed initially, with him skimping on alimony and then debating on lesser terms. He was basically given an inch and tried to take a mile, dragging it out for so long that per divorce law it had to go to court. I almost suspect he did so as a way to try and drag her through the mud, though he may have genuinely been that delusional. I consider it a win only because his ex-wife was adamant about only wanting what was somewhat fair, and for it to be over because of the strain it was having on the family. Per the contract, he owed her still about $50K in back pay, but she was content with $15K, which was less than this guy made in a month. I did regret the win, though. She seemed like a very nice woman with the patience of a saint, while almost all of his anger towards her seemed to come from wounded ego. I should also note that though they had 2 kids together, both were in their 20s by the time I was hired, and custody had never been an issue at all, even for the one who had been a minor when they'd separated. It's like in The Hobbit when I guess I'll call him King Dwarf, is like, I can't remember. Wait, is it Thorin? Is it Thorin Oakshield or something like that? God, I can't remember. It's been so long. Those movies are old now. But it's like how he's like, no, the gold is mine. I won't share it with anyone or anything. And greed, man. It can ruin you. I did some custody work early in my career and won some cases, more on the merit of my trial skills than on the merit of the parents. The thing with family law work in general is that there is essentially no bar to entry. Anybody with a law degree and a pulse can get a family law practice up and running quickly because there is just an absolute glut of work. What that also means is that 75% of the lawyers practicing family law are clueless and awful. Early in my career, I certainly was clueless, but at the least, I was not awful. Therefore, in a battle between clueless and awful versus just clueless usually won. So yeah, I can't recall any specific cases, except to say that fighting over children in court is a terrible thing and basically everyone loses. I regret that entire portion of my career. What? You know what? Just to be safe, thing you did ended up saving your butt later. I was an expediter at a restaurant. It was super busy and I was trying to get runners for food. Was about to send out a stack of dim sum when I looked at the ticket again with a note that said, "No peanuts on the tempura tofu." I had read it earlier and didn't sprinkle peanuts on it. Another server was about to run it to the table when I told him to wait and get the actual server for the table. We were slammed and he was kinda mad, but he went and got him anyway. The actual server came back and he's all frustrated when I ask him, "Does your no peanuts guy not like peanuts or is he allergic to them?" He's very allergic to them. That's why I put no peanuts on the ticket. He was all being crappy with me. I told him, well, the frickin' tempura tofu is fried in frickin' peanut oil. Didn't realize the head chef was behind me and heard the whole thing. Server didn't know we only use peanut oil. It was an Asian fusion, really nice upscale restaurant. Needless to say, she, the head chef, frickin' reamed this guy. I was a half second from sending that food out too. Would have been bad. Whew, I mean, in that kind of business, yeah, you gotta be careful with that sort of thing all the time. I mean, when I really think about it, I think it's only been in the last 5 years that I've been consistently asked at every restaurant that I go to, do you have allergies or anything like that? So, it's a good thing that people people are looking out for it a lot more. Safety glasses. When working away, it's easy to talk yourself into doing something really quick without them, and there is always a voice in your head yelling at you to put them on. Stopped grinding the thing I was working on, got my glasses, came back, and then this chunk flies up and cracks the right lens. Spidey senses 1, Murphy's Law 0. I knock out my shoes and squeeze the toes for good measure. Hi, Mr. Brown Recluse. Only happened once, but was enough to convince me it was a good habit to have. I've had a handful of these in my life. The one that popped in my head first was from a party when I was 16. It was in a small farm town about 20 to 25 minutes from my actual town, and everyone was partying in somebody's parents' barn and having a real good time. I didn't realize that our designated driver had been drinking all night. When it was time to go, I couldn't even tell she was tipsy, but something wasn't right, so I didn't want to drive back with them for whatever reason. I decided to get the verbal tongue lashing from my mom when she came to pick me up. Well, my friends in the first car were apparently veering across the road, got picked up by the cops, and all of them got to spend the night in jail. Glad I opted for my mom. That is a really crummy move of that designated driver to do. Like, you have a responsibility for your friends if you are the designated driver. That's just a fact. Arrived in San Francisco a week into a trip. As we gather our things during a moment of downtime, I go back to check the bus because, it never hurts. Found my passport, which I had no idea I'd dropped. Was about to put a new load of laundry into my washing machine in the dark. Saw what looked to be a large sock still in the washing machine. Put my hand halfway into the washing machine, then pulled my hand back up and thought, I don't usually leave things in my washing machine. Turned on the light and it was a bat sitting in there. How to get in your house, how to get in your washing machine, but also, did you know that bats actually are one of the biggest carriers of rabies? I only heard that the other day. Whether it's true or not, you tell me. When I was like 5 years old, my parents took my sister and me to a planetarium show, and every kid got a souvenir pencil that had the distance of the planets from the sun written on it: Mercury, Venus, Earth, etc. The guy running the planetarium show said something like, hang on to these pencils until 7th grade, kids, and you can use them to cheat on your astronomy tests. He was joking, but I never forgot. And sure enough, it was the exact pencil I used to cheat on the astronomy in 7th grade. I felt smart, but also bad because I didn't feel good about cheating and almost never cheated after that. That is the kind of thing that I think about a lot, just like a little tidbit that someone says that just gets the gears working in your mind. You're like, I will remember this forever. I had a car sitting on jack stands because I needed to do some transmission work. Before climbing under it, I thought it'd be a good idea to rock the car around. One of the jack stands was not in the right spot and the car slipped off it, slamming down on the front disc brakes. Would have killed me. This is from 30 years ago, so some details may be different these days. After enlisting in the army, recruits get a list of everything they must bring to boot camp. On this list was a padlock. During processing the 5 or so days before the real training starts, recruits are given their military equipment, including duffel bags, and told to put their things they brought with them in the duffel bag. After finally getting everything in, I was left with just the padlock. I had no idea what to do with it, but I noticed if I closed my duffel bag in a certain way, I could close the lock on the hook. So when we get to the training unit and off of the cattle trucks and a few hundred drill sergeants are yelling and screaming and telling us to line up, which we do, our duffel bags are in front of us. The drill sergeant then proceeds to check if the bags are locked, and if not, they grab them at the bottom and whirl them around, flinging the entire contents on the ground. Everyone in the entire company had their stuff dumped except for me and the one other guy, only because locking my duffel bag was the only thing I thought of doing. Putting it in my pocket was not an option because they made it very clear that we were not to have any civilian items in our uniform pockets. Saved an email where a lead developer told me to do something stupid. A couple years later, him, now a manager who liked to yell at his subordinates, we were talking about this stupid behavior and he yelled, "Well, why did you do that?" I pulled up his email, clearly instructing me to do just that. He sputtered and walked off speechless. This guy is one of the reasons I still have trust issues with management, even after a string of really competent, caring, trustworthy managers. This is why the archive email button exists. I bought a used Subaru Baja that was 5 years old at the time and had 75k miles for $12k. The salesman offered an extended warranty that covered the engine for $2,500, would last 3 years, 36k miles. That was kind of a lot, and I usually don't buy those. I don't know what got into me that day, but I said, sure. 1 month and 750 miles later, after an oil change at a mechanic shop, oil started shooting into the Pistons? I'm not good with cars. Oil went where it wasn't supposed to go is the point. Completely ruined the engine and turbo. The dealer had to keep it for 3 weeks. The warranty company flew someone out to inspect the car and eventually approved a replacement engine, turbo, and any other affected parts. Total repairs cost almost $11,000 and the warranty then applied to all the new parts too. Car drove like it was brand new. Later discovered the car had 5 previous owners before me, but I couldn't find any accidents or serious repair history. This is probably the only time buying an extended warranty on something actually worked out in my favor. I bought a really nice tablet a few years ago, a Wacom Intuos Cintiq, essentially a drawing tablet built into a laptop for animation and the like. Sometimes when you buy nice things, they come in nice boxes, and for some reason I don't really want to throw this box away immediately. I put it in the storage area of my basement and forget about it. After only about a month, this $2,500 tablet stopped working. It wasn't dropped or damaged, and I'm still not sure how it broke. It would simply try to boot up and fail, crashing and demanding a restart. I called support, and after several calls and many hours, we were unable to resolve the issue. They said I could send it back and get a new one if it wasn't physically damaged. They told me it needed to be sent back in the original box. I now keep boxes for everything I buy until the warranty expires. I work in IT. When I started working where I do 9 years ago, I noticed that volume shadow copies, VSS, were not turned on the file server. I went ahead and turned it on, and thank God I have never had to pull a tape in the whole 9 years, and I hope to not ever have to. I did not ask for permission to do it because I knew corporate wouldn't let me do it. Space was money back then. The guy at corporate that was over all their servers called and thanked me for doing it because he was also going to do it, and since I did it first, he was allowed to. I have had to use the VSS copies many times, but most recently for our exec VP of quality accidentally deleted her network share with all of our employees' info on them. Thankfully, VSS is on, and it saved my butt as well as hers. I was remodeling my house, took out a loan and had to get the house appraised to get the loan, found that my house was worth $100,000 more than I had it insured for, raised my limit on the home insurance to $50,000 more than the appraised value in anticipation of completing renovations. 2 weeks later, house burned to the ground due to a faulty bathroom fan that I did not touch. City insurance company and loan company all sent separate investigators due to how shady it looked. Well, that is simply unfortunate. I'm sorry your hard work went to waste. A couple of years ago, I restarted The Sopranos from season 1. I think it's in the first season where the water heater leaks and floods Tony's basement. So there are these scenes where he's waiting around in a flooded basement. I was imagining what a nightmare that would be. It reminded me that when I bought my house, the inspector told me I would need to replace the water heater within 5 years. I then realized that was like 12 years prior. So I suddenly got nervous. I went and looked at the water heater and it seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I also did not have the money to pay to have a new water heater installed. So I decided to go ahead and buy a new water heater and then save up money to pay someone to install it. The water heater arrived and I stored it in the laundry room. Just a few weeks after it arrived, I happened to look at the old water heater and I noticed the catch pan under it had an inch of water in it. It was leaking. Oh no! Emergency. Except wait a minute, I already have a plan for this. So instead of saving up money to hire a plumber, I went to YouTube and learned how to install my own water heater. It all worked out perfectly, all because The Sopranos made me anxious about the condition of my water heater, causing me to randomly purchase a water heater I had no immediate plans to install. I actually coincidentally started watching The Sopranos myself very recently. For the first time, I'm on season 4, and I am enjoying it a lot. When I was 20, I worked at a gas station. They had just changed the law to if the customer looked 40 and under, you had to ID them for cigarettes. I was by myself. Lady came in and ordered a pack of Camels. She looked roughly 45, so I didn't ask. I had this nagging feeling throughout the transaction that it would be a very good idea to ask. So before I took her money, I kinda laughed and said, "Mind if I see your ID real quick?" "I'm real sorry, you're clearly old enough, but they changed the law recently on who we have to ID." She just looked at me and said, "I'm so glad you asked," and flashed her work card at me. She was a frickin' expert. If I didn't ask her, I would have been arrested and fined. That was the day I learned to trust my gut, and I also suck at telling people's ages. She was 35. Went hiking in the middle of the day with a friend and his girlfriend. I brought a flashlight for each of us. Well, the hike took a lot longer than expected, and my buddy Charlie's GF sprained her foot at the end. It took us nearly 3 times as long to get back, and it was dark with relatively rocky terrain. Those flashlights saved our bacon. I can't even fathom how long it would have taken to stumble in the dark otherwise. I had originally booked a rental car for a trip to Iceland using my credit card points. 2 days before I cancelled and booked it with my credit card, which provides rental vehicle coverage, because it looked like the weather wasn't going to be great while we were there and I wanted the extra protection. While there, we got into an accident for which we were not at fault. The car was almost a total loss and I had to pay up to $12,000 out of pocket to the company. It took a few months and a ton of paperwork, but the credit card company refunded all of it. I still think about how so lucky it was that I changed the booking. I would have been ruined for a very long time otherwise. I used to be a banner tow pilot and was often asked to fly banners over the New York City area, especially over the Hudson River. I would pick them up at an airport in New Jersey and make my way from there. Typically, if you were to run into some kind of engine problem, you have a fair number of places you could theoretically land if you had the engine trouble. Not so much over the New York City metro area, so I picked out a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, of specific places I could try to land my plane if I ever had to. On the 1-year anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson, Captain Sullenberger, etc., I was given the job to fly a banner over a boat on the Hudson that would be carrying the crew and some passengers from the flight. On the way there, my engine failed while I was less than 1,000 feet above the ground, sinking quickly. I needed to find a place to land right away. Fortunately, my best previously selected spot was just to my left, a landfill on Staten Island, and I put the plane right on top of it. This entire topic is basically preparedness is a virtue. My friends and I were always giving crap to another friend because he was never wearing the seatbelt while driving. One night, another friend and him drove me home. It was pretty late and we were all tired. When they dropped me off, I told him, "Use the frickin' seatbelt, you dumb butt." The next day, around lunchtime, I got a call that my 2 friends got in a car accident. The dumbbutt fell asleep while driving my other dumbbutt friend's car. They hit a parked car which hit the car in front of it and got stuck into a wall. The parked car acted as a ramp for their car. They flipped over and slid like 20 meters upside down. For some reason, the dumbbutt had his seatbelt on for the first time ever and he didn't get injured. Both of them crawled outside the car without a single scratch. If I'm not wrong, my friend in the passenger seat broke his pinky though. Dumbbutt learned his lesson and his seatbelt is always on now, even when he's in the passenger seat. My mother's co-worker convinced her to get the best possible insurance when pregnant, because this co-worker had kids deprived of oxygen at birth. She said she could lower it once the kids were 5 and seemed normal. It was a struggle as my parents were both in college and working while raising my brother, so they were looking to cut costs wherever possible. I ended up being born with a birth defect that required a transplant before 5. Before the new doctor even told her what was wrong, after rushing me away via ambulance, they asked her if she had insurance. She was able to say yes. Gold Star, Platinum, whatever. Many kids died even with the top-class care I received, so I surely wouldn't have made it without it. I'm turning 30 next year. Thanks, random lady I've never met. Saved a receipt from my dentist. They charged me, then delayed the procedure I paid for. When I asked for a refund, they changed my entire bill and told me I owed them another $300 when all they actually did was a cleaning and x-rays. I submitted both copies of the invoice to my dental insurance company and told them what happened. 3 weeks later, the insurance company, Delta Dental, resolved the issue with the dentist and I got a refund. Despite the dentist attempting to defraud me, they still regularly call me asking me to come back in. Recently, they changed their name and moved a block down the road to try and hide from the plethora of negative reviews on Yelp. I should really go for a dental checkup soon, actually, now that I think about it. Very minor, but once I was going out drinking in San Francisco with some friends. We loved going to this kind of dive bar in the Tenderloin, rough neighborhood. Anyway, I had just bought a new car and was worried about parking in the Tenderloin. All my friends assured me it'd probably be fine. As we parked on the street about 2 blocks from the bar, a homeless guy came up to me and said, "Man, you don't want to park that new crap here. Somebody gonna smash them windows and steal your stereo, your sunglasses." On a whim, I just said, "Yeah, but we're kinda late. Want to keep an eye on it for me?" He pauses for a second, goes, "Like a sanctuary guard?" "Yeah, man, I'll watch your car. You got $10? My friends, confused, started mumbling about just walking on, but I thought it couldn't hurt so much, so I gave the guy $10. Here's your $10, keep an eye on it, man. If it's still in good shape when I get back, I'll give you another $10. Damn, $20? All I gotta do is sit here and make sure nobody frickin' smashes my window. There isn't anything inside anyway, it's new. I got you, man, I got you. He took a huge swig of this bottle of wild turkey and we were on our way. Anyway, the night progresses, we drink and have a good time, and now we're all proper drunk except for my friend Mary, who was our designated driver. I gave her my keys and we start walking down the block. One by one, we notice almost every parking spot has shattered glass next to it. Somebody went through the area and smashed each window to get into the cars. I get this sinking feeling in my stomach. I'm already mentally prepared to have to shell out a few $100 to replace the window of a car that wasn't even mine a week ago. But lo and behold, we get to the spot and my car is fine, and the homeless guy is bundled up in a sleeping bag, and he sees me and goes, "Hey, you're back! You won't believe what crap I did for you. Check this out." And he shows me this huge frickin' bruise on his face and pulls his gloves and shows me his knuckles, which are scraped to hell. "What happened?" I said. "Some bunch of expletives. He comes around here smashing windows and grabbing crap. He gets to your car," and I'm like, "Yo, pass that one. That crap's my responsibility." And he turned around, pulled back on this big old brick he's got in his hands, and I jumped that mother from behind and he hit me in the head with his goddamn brick. But I knocked him good, man. I changed that mother's mind, man. He was all strung out and he ran off down the block. My friends and I are staring at this guy incredulously. My car is fine, spotless. I reach into my pocket for $10, but I realize I don't have cash. "Dude, thanks so much. Give me a second. I gotta get your cash," I say as I walk into the liquor store on the corner, use the ATM. As I'm checking out, I realize they've got 750s of wild turkey in there for like $10. I buy one for him. I give him the $10 and the bottle. "Thanks for keeping an eye on the car for me. You would have thought this dude just won the lottery." "Oh, damn," he just kept screaming. Then he kicked the pile of blankets and crap on the side, and I realized he had a girl in there sleeping, and he goes, "Wake your butt up, look what I got." And she rubs her eyes and looks confused at us, then at him and at the bottle, and then at us. Wordlessly, she reaches for the bottle as he hands it to her, and he's still screaming and hollering like it's the best day of his life. You gave that man a sworn duty, and he carried it out, I guess. Very simple, but a roll of toilet paper in the glove compartment and my car has literally saved my butt multiple times. A tropical storm was blowing through my city a few months ago, and we were projected to get some winds, gusts, and significant rain. Because our parking lot isn't large enough for all staff and our clients, a lot of us have to park on the street, which is lined with large old trees. As I rolled up on the morning, we were due to get the storm. I parked in my usual spot down the block. Before I shut the car off, though, I noticed that this particular spot was located directly across the street from one of the largest trees on the block. Thinking, you know what, just to be safe, I put the car in reverse and backed up about 10 feet, safely out of the direct line of fire from any trees. In the middle of that afternoon, in the midst of the howling wind and driving rain, we heard a huge thud down the street. Went to investigate, and that same tree I'd been parked across the street from fell across the road and missed my car by about 8 feet. At that moment, I was glad that I decided to play it safe. The car parked on the other side of the street directly across from where I'd initially been got absolutely destroyed. Crushed roof, windows blown out, just pulverized. One day I got hit in the head while surfing. It turned out to be a concussion, and I went to the hospital with my mum. I was 17 at the time. We met with the doctor in A&E, and he said, "It's a concussion. We could do a CT scan if you want, but there's probably no need." I was unsure and just said, "Yeah, I would like a scan." After the scan was done, I was told that they didn't see anything, but the radiographer would be checking it in the morning. Next day, I got a call to be told that I needed an MRI, that they had found a tumor in my brain. If they didn't catch it there, I would have lost my vision from the tumor, and it would have been too late to do anything at that stage. Hey, if you're at the doctor's, why not just ask for the whole shebang? Well, unless you're in America. I stayed up late one night playing video games, but I left an unfinished can of soda out overnight. When I woke up the next morning, I picked it up, held it about an inch away from my mouth, and was about to drink it. Then I thought, wait a minute, I don't want this hot AF soda. So I walked over to the sink to pour out what was left. As I poured it, a huge cockroach crawled out of the hole of the top. I promptly high-fived myself. People who are the reason for certain rules. What is your story? Former co-workers of mine. Contracted employees have a maximum amount of time that they can work each week. Company pushed a lot of 60-plus-year-old employees into retirement via a benefits change. A bunch of those who retired re-signed on as contracted hourly workers and started making more money than they had before they retired. Checking IDEA work when we have parties that contain alcohol used to be an honor system until a newly hired person under 21 drank too much and vomited in the hallway. Screw the honor system, my liver needs alcohol. Hey, you're ruining it for the rest of us! They banned doing handstands at my primary school because we used to play the game where you'd sing a song and go up into a handstand, and when I went up, for some reason, my arm just gave way and I landed on my shoulder and broke my collarbone. I saw my old teacher a few weeks ago, and apparently that's the handstand story equivalent of the boy who swung back on his chair and cracked his head open. Oh god, that reminds me of how in primary school I used to swing back and forth on my chair until one day one of my best friends at the time actually cracked his head open on the corner of a table behind him, and he left a big old pool of blood there. It was awful. There was also a guy who slipped on a banana peel, legitimately slipped on a freaking banana peel and fell down stone steps, and they had to get paramedics in or something. When I was going into 6th grade, my family was moving to a new town. In order to prevent myself and my brother from having to go through the hassle of moving and to alleviate some of their stress, my parents decided to send us to sleepaway camp for 6 weeks. My brother, 2 years older, proceeded to get extremely sick within the first week or so that we were at camp. He was on bed rest, and at more than one point, the staff had to bring him into the small town nearby to go to the hospital. My mother had a tendency to overreact and make mountains over molehills. She was extremely unhappy with the staff and thought it was outrageous that my brother got that sick that quickly, assuming that someone must have showed up to camp on the first day knowing they were sick and spread the germ to my brother. Luckily, he recovered after the first week and was able to enjoy the rest of the summer. When the term was over, we left camp excited to see our new house and meet the people at our new school. Fast forward to the next summer, our parents saw how much we enjoyed camp and decided that having us out of the house for a month wasn't so bad for themselves either. Instead of driving us this summer, they decided to send us on the buses the camp ran to different counties and states. The total ride was about 4 hours, an eternity for a middle schooler with a surplus of energy. Once we arrived at the camp, the buses all line up and there's an in-process tent set up where all the kids had to walk through before they could get their bags and go to their cabins. It was taking forever. I started to get irritated. I had waited all year for this, now I have to wait more. I finally get off the bus and into the tent and see what they're doing. Each camper is getting asked a series of questions about their current health. Are they feeling sick? Do they have any allergies? Do they have any prescriptions, etc.? They would then get their temperature taken by the nurse to confirm they did not have a fever and were sent with a counselor to their cabin. I got to the end of the line and asked the nurse why they're doing all of this because it is taking so long and I was being an impatient child. Her response, parent was very upset last summer that their camper got sick, so now we are screening everyone and quarantining them if they show any signs of symptoms of being ill. I look at my brother who is standing behind me and yelled, "Thanks a lot!" In 3rd grade, I jumped off a very tall piece of playground equipment, smacked my chin on my knee and bit my tongue. It was a bloodbath, and the teacher passed out and hit her head off of the pavement, resulting in another bloodbath. Well, the next morning, there was an announcement stating no more jumping off the tower on the playground. The next day, the teacher's son tried jumping off of a rope swing over the schoolyard fence and broke both of his arms. The school removed all of the fun stuff off the playground that summer. I can only imagine they were probably the most hated people on the playground for a little while after that. At my school, it was a rule to not act like a ninja. When I was young, I got interested in Naruto, so I started acting like a ninja. 3 people saw me and started acting like ninjas as well. The teacher noticed, so she told us to stop. We stopped for the day, but the next day we did it again. Our teacher was getting annoyed, so she gave us a bad star, a red star that meant you were bad. At the end of the week, you had to take the bad star home for your parents to see. We got mad at the teacher, so when she wasn't looking, one of the ninjas stood up and walked slowly. He plopped the red stars from each of the ninja's star sheets. Teacher noticed and had enough. She sent us to the principal's office. He was laughing but told us to stop. Next day, there was a rule. Don't act like ninjas. Bunch of goddamn uppity ninjas. So at my high school, there was a rule that was added my junior year and is even in bold in the student student-parent handbook. This rule was that students are not allowed off campus during the 10-minute passing period at all. The reason that this rule exists is that my sophomore year, I was really craving a Starbucks during my first period, so in the last few minutes of the period, I mobile ordered a coffee and then during break ran half a mile to pick up my coffee and walk back. I made it back to my class on time, but the school still tried to get me in trouble until I said, "Show me where it says I can't leave campus during the passing period in the handbook and I will accept any punishment. Otherwise, you have no grounds to punish me." And after 20 minutes of sitting in the office, I got out with no punishment. Then my junior year, that rule was added to the handbook. To this day, it's one of my worst accomplishments. I'm just waiting for that person to be like, "I'm the reason that they locked Newgrounds or Miniclip or Armored Games from the school computers." I moved from the Midwest to Texas to attend college. It was the first time I tasted deep-fried okra. The cafeteria was all you could eat. The okra was like sniff to me, and I ate plateful after plateful. Pretty soon, the rule was 2 servings per meal. I got Beyblades banned in 4th grade, circa like 2002. My mom had cheaped out and bought me an off-brand Beyblade that was heavier and I think made out of metal or something dense. Anyways, we had this one kid who would bring in like the Battle Dome or whatever they had. My Beyblade would collide with theirs and theirs would just go flying out of the dome at unsuspecting victims. Picking up speed, running out of time, going head to head, it's a way of life, you gotta fall down, eat ground to get back up again. Let's Beyblade! I adored Beyblade as a kid. The anime, the Beyblades themselves, they were so cool. I thought it was the best fad to come out at that time in schools and stuff. Yeah, there was the hazards and everything, but it was cooler than frickin' Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I have fallen so frickin' far off from. I don't even know what's going on in that anymore. I also remember Battle Beat-A Man, which I really liked and I even bought, but like no one gave a crap about Battle Beat-A Man. Does anyone even freaking remember Battle Beat-A Man? Back in the day on Neopets, there was this rule that you couldn't make posts titled things like Girls Only Party, but the rule was never enforced. So one day when I was 12, and on my mother's Neopets account since I was too young to use the Neo boards, I made one of these boards, and everything was fine for the first 10 to 15 pages. Everyone was staying within the rules on the rule-breaking post, so TNT, the Neopets team, basically the mods and developers and stuff, left us alone. And then someone decided to RP going swimming, which was kind of risky and I warned against it. Shortly thereafter, someone made a post that was pretty similar to the following. "Oh, okay. Gets out of water, bikini falls off. Oops." The board was instantly deleted. My mother's account was permanently frozen, and from that day forward, when someone used the word bikini on the Neo boards, a filter changed the word to cardigan. When I worked at Whole Foods in the prepared food section, I used to make myself a burrito for dinner. I would load that mother as full with beans, rice, and meat as possible. I usually ended up with something that was about the size of a fat baby's arm. Yeah, that all came to a stop when one of the storage managers saw me making my own burrito. After that, we would get written up if they caught us making our own food like burritos and whatnot. My freshman year of college, I made it so that no one in not just my dorm, but all dorms on campus were allowed to use the microwave located in each of the dorm's common area after 10 p.m. because drunk but me went to microwave a Hot Pocket one night and instead of setting the timer to 3 minutes, I set it to 30, which wouldn't have been a problem if I stayed there waiting for it, but drunk but me decided at that moment, hey, you know what would be even better than being drunk? Being drunk and high, and proceeded to go back to my room for a bong hit, which turned into several, which turned into me nearly passing out, roused only by the now blaring fire alarm that made everyone else in the dorm to also have to go outside in the middle of the goddamn night. And of course, due to the whole where there's smoke, there's fire rule, a couple of fire trucks showed up to the action. Me and everyone else that I lived in this dorm with were all standing outside grumbling about what butthole caused this, some speculating that someone was stupid enough to have pulled a false alarm. At a certain point amongst that grumbling did it dawn on me that I just left that Hot Pocket in the microwave, and that's when I started worrying that the sort of all this 3 a.m. hubbub could have been me, a deep, abiding shame that was validated when I saw one of the firefighters emerge from the dorm with a charred microwave. I joined in the chorus of incredulousness from the other cohabitants of my dorm who were shouting pleas of what drunken, dumb butt burn up the microwave, and whoever did this is gonna get their butt beat, and similar witticisms. I figured at this point, lying was my only way out, and in the end it worked. No one that night ever found out it was me who burned up the microwave in my drunken and stoned state of dishevelment, and was the source of the no microwaves after 10 rule in the dorms that was enforced for the rest of the time I was in school, and could still be in place for all I know. My 4th high school now has a rule that teachers have to actually check in with the office before allowing a student into your class, even if you know them. My mom gave up on me going to high school because she didn't graduate, and neither did my grandma. No one on my dad's side graduated either, pulled me out of school. I moved across the state and started going to my old school again, and the teachers didn't check in on if I was supposed to be there. I still hated going to classes, but needed the testing so I could get credits, so I would ask my friends who had the same classes to tell me when their tests were, and would sit in the cafeteria for both lunch sections. It took them a few months to figure it out. Our gym where we had prep rallies was a level lower than most of the school, so there was an elevator so disabled people could get there. A few of my buddies and I would take the elevator back up with one of my best friends who was in a wheelchair, because we would sit with him during the rallies and walk back to class with him and chat in the elevator. One day, a assistant principal saw us get out with him and lost his mind because he thought we were using the elevator being lazy. They put up a sign next week saying to leave the elevator for people who need it. My buddy who was in the wheelchair and his dad sent several angry emails about it because it essentially segregated him from his friends. They took the sign down pretty soon after that. I guess that counts, but it was very brief enforcement of a rule. Don't know if this counts, but a guy in my school was the reason for the boys' bathroom being locked in between breaks because they poured washing powder and detergent down the toilet, then flushing, causing a foam party. If anyone needed the bathroom, we had to go to the office and fill out a form and then get a key. It lasted about 2 weeks until the teachers and most of our senior students kicked up a fit about it because it was taking about 10 minutes out of your class time if you needed to go, rather than the 2 minutes it used to take. Plus, the girls' bathroom was still open, so it became an equality issue and they got unlocked again. While working at McDonald's when I was younger, I thought it would be cool to make a quesadilla with what was in the kitchen. It turned out really well, but my manager ratted me to the GM, and the next day there was a sign in the kitchen stating that only items on the menu were to be made by cooks. When I was a freshman in college, I brewed beer in my dorm room. I got caught and written up, but it was before I added the yeast, so my defense was that I did not have alcohol in the dorm, and was just landing to bring the mixture to a 21-year-old friend off campus prior to adding the yeast. It was a private university, and they called bullcrap, but the penalty was just a slap on the wrist, and they changed the residency code to specifically prohibit fermenting yeast. That's not a bad defense, to be honest, but it obviously didn't work, and at least the punishment was, like they said, just a slap on the wrist. I wasn't the reason for the rule, but I was the one who implemented it. I was the network admin at a middle school back when mice balls was still a thing. Some of the kids were regularly stealing the balls out of the mice and taking them with them, so we'd have to replace the mice out of our meager spares. Because of that, I implemented the policy that all mice were to be turned upside down at the end of class, and the teacher was to walk around and visually inspect each mouse to ensure the ball was still in place. Ended the problem right there. During my junior year, my physics teacher did the mousetrap car assignment and held a competition to see who could make a mousetrap car go the farthest and fastest. I spent the whole night before making it. The next day, I did a test run right before the testing, and my rear axle snapped in half, basically ensuring that my mousetrap car was not going to move. Anyway, the teacher assigned 50 points for having your mousetrap car there, and 50 points if it moved. He gave each student at least 3 attempts to get his mousetrap car to move. Everyone in my class got theirs to move, and I knew mine was basically fricked. We were doing these runs in the hallways, and I was so glad that no one came out to see how mine will do. When it came to my turn, I set up my mousetrap car and let it go. The car was barely moving, and I was losing my mind due to how fricked I thought it was. My teacher had to come closer, get on his knees, and see that the car is actually slowly moving. Confused students came out due to my celebration and howling only to see the mousetrap car at my knees. I got full credits for that assignment. The physics teacher did the assignment again my senior year, and I saw that he changed it so that your mousetrap car had to go at least 1 foot to get those points. Maybe there were other students that were reasons for it, but as of my knowledge, the teacher had me in mind. I went to a Catholic school that had a strict uniform policy. I'm the oldest of 4. This will be important later. For Halloween, seniors are allowed to dress up while the underclassmen wear uniforms. Well, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade and always wore a uniform. My senior year, I came into school on Halloween with a shirt and jeans students on. When asked what I was, I replied, a public school student. Next year, my brother was a senior, and when the list of unacceptable costumes came up, public school student was on it. My youngest brother graduated in 2016, and it's still on the handout. So back in the day, there was an electronics store known as Circuit City. The attire was pretty simple: red polo shirt, black or khaki pants, and black shoes. Around this time, Heelys became popular, and I decided that I needed a pair of those loafers. I got mine in black and wore them shift after shift, scooting around the store and messing with customers as I silently glided between aisles and snuck up behind them. On my last day, I may have decided to have a few beers before work and figured I would put in a few hours, get my check and bail. I also may have decided that running in said Heelys to chase after a soon-to-be former co-worker was a fantastic idea, and subsequently tripped, which resulted in me flying into a yellow concrete pole. This resulted in me hitting the pole with the palm of my hand, think Superman but more idiotic and with poor posture, and breaking my arm. After getting a fancy cast, I filed workers' compensation because, why the heck not? After getting approved, since there was nothing defining whether or not the black shoes were supposed to be wheel-free, Circuit City promptly amended the handbook and stated that flat black bottomed shoes were the only acceptable kind. A year later, they went under, and I still have my Heelys. Even as an adult, I still catch myself being slightly jealous of kids with Heelys, because I'm like, I'm too old to wear Heelys, but I guess not. But also, I wish I had Heelys when I was a kid. Uni rolled out monthly internet traffic quotas because several students reportedly downloaded what at the time in history were inordinately excessive amounts of data. This was almost 20 years ago. My group of friends knew some people who worked in the uni's IT management department, so a few days after that was announced, we go by their office to head off for movie night, and I noticed a sheet of paper with a list of student numbers and associated traffic volumes posted on the team billboard. My student number is sitting right at the very top. The reason why it called my attention, comfortably sporting over 5 gigabytes of traffic, 5 times and 10 times the amount for the second and third students on the list. This was during the time where private cable internet had access to 640 kilobytes and institutions like universities had T1 connections, 1.5-ish megabytes. I asked what that was. Oh, That is why we're rolling out monthly internet quotas. That's the list of top 30 students who downloaded the most data, and next to them is how much they downloaded last month alone. Why do you ask? Do you know who some of these people are? I told them I didn't know about any of the others, but the one at the top was mine. The look on their faces was a mix of fascination and shock. And for the rest of the night, I had to listen to them ask me several times how had I managed to do that consistently for the last few months. A bit of background. Uni IT, being unable to guarantee that computers would be clean enough in the long run, had to put in place an OS image download that all computers would grab and reset themselves to. Imagine Windows 10 disk restore functionality, but in the late 90s and early 2000s. During a lot of project nights, labs were open 24/7 to students. We would end up eventually losing focus, which would quickly turn into playtime. Usually something like Q3 or Freelancer, as the computers were always tabula rasa on reboot. We were always asked to shut them down, and they themselves would do so if not logged into after a while. We ended up having to install it all again. We had enough disk copies. This was also the time I quite literally downloaded all that Game Hippo had to offer to try on campus computers, as well as repeat downloads of Stepmania, DDR, Beatmania for PC freeware, tons of songs, and the real clincher, accompanying high-quality videos that would play during gameplay. So yeah, I basically did it on repeat downloads. The funny thing about it is that when the limit came into play, students had to basically authenticate themselves with the uni proxy via basic authentication on browser. Every time someone expired their quota, the system would simply prompt you for authentication again, and thus my friends and I started using the account pool notion. You ran out of allowance? Here, use my account. Whole different can of worms. My senior year of high school, 2004, the powers that be decided we had to work on a year-long project of our choice. At the end of the year, we had to give a presentation on our project. The rules given to us for appropriate attire clearly stated students must wear either a dress, skirt, or a tie and collared shirt with slacks. Being a girl who really hated dresses and skirts, I decided to be smart and wear a tie, collared shirt, and slacks. Nobody argued with me, but the next year the rule stated boys wear a tie and slacks and girls wear skirts shirts or dresses. Yes, it was sexist. No, I wasn't protesting the sexism, I just wanted to wear pants all day for a 15-minute presentation. Nothing wrong with that if you ask me. So I've got two stories for this. One is in 6th grade and the other is in 9th grade. When I was in 6th grade, we used to shoot paper at our teacher with those little rubber band hair ties, whatever bracelet things. After a few months, the principal got tired of hearing the teachers complain that the kids were shooting paper at them. We did it in class, at recess, at lunch, on the bus, wherever we could. That Christmas, my mom bought me a big box of that stuff, so I showed up to school with the bag full of it and sold it to the kids. They got caught every time but never ratted me out. I just kept bringing it in and let them shoot it. We got in so much trouble for it now, they will suspend anyone for just having a rubber band. When I was in 9th grade, we had a prep rally assemble, and the Spirit Week theme for that day was class colors. My grade decorated our entire building with glitter all over the floor and walls, tables, chairs, desks. It was everywhere. 2 years later, they're still trying to clean it up. They banned glitter for the entire school. Nobody is allowed to use it because a few cheerleaders and student council went insane. I walked out of my second hour and it looked like a unicorn threw up. Zookeepers. What animals do you most enjoy taking care of, and which are the worst? I did a behind-the-scenes article on a zoo once and spent time with zookeepers and vets. A really chilled conversation trust in Jersey, Channel Islands. The lemurs were not kept in cages because they needed space to roam from tree to tree. The zoo figured out that they had their area that was home, but they were free to leave any time they wanted. There was nothing to stop them wandering off. They didn't leave, they were happy there, apart from the father of the group who would, about once a month, decide he needed a break from the family and head over about 400 yards down the road to the pub. They would get a call from the pub saying that the furry little guy is hanging out in their garden again. Most of the time, he'd just wander back. People and animals truly are more alike than we think. It sounds like a regular English dad wandering down to the pub to take a break. My sister is a zookeeper. We asked her and her keeper friends which animal they would least like to be trapped in a room with. They all immediately, unanimously agreed on one animal, chimp. As one keeper put it, if a lion gets out of a cage, I would run and help the public and other keepers. If a chimp got out of its cage, I would run to my car and drive away. I did animal control for almost a decade. Wasn't afraid of nothing, except chimps. I became a scared little girl when we got a loose chimp call. I don't blame anyone for being afraid of chimps. I mean, I'm pretty sure I heard that recently there's been sightings that chimps use, like, sharpened sticks now. Yeah, I'd be scared too. I worked at a museum that kept a large turkey vulture tethered to a perch in the center of an animal room. Children would tease this poor bird mercilessly despite the many signs and warnings. The bird sat in stoic silence. But almost once a day, at the perfect moment, he would hop down as one of the little chumps walked off, and he'd grab them with his huge bill just above the belt line by their pasty, fat, little French fry-infused love handles, clamp down hard and then snap it back. Imagine someone grabbing you by the soft parts with a pair of channel lock pliers. Their scream and the nasty welt was always the same. By the time parents, teachers, and staff arrived, he would always be back on the perch, just staring still stoic. Best part of that job. I fed one of the sloths while volunteering behind the scenes at a zoo for a service organization, and it fell asleep halfway through chewing a pear slice. Then it woke up a minute later and finished it. It was definitely a cute animal. I volunteer weekly at a rescue center for birds of prey. I avoid the bald eagles unless absolutely necessary, even our resident birds, which are non-releasable and some of whom have been in our care for their entire lives, are the worst. They are scared of everything and very finicky. We spent 6 weeks last summer adjusting one to a cart. It wasn't just when it rolled by. He couldn't stand any of the new carts just sitting there across from him. We used a grant to update supplies, including 8 new great collapsible rolling carts. We use them a lot, especially when we take birds off site. Apparently, a bird thinks your product is a rolling death machine, and that is sadly not a suitable reason to return something. Other things bald eagles hate: water horses being carried or unraveled, the sound of rakes on gravel, buckets up until 5 gallons, those are fine, plastic bags, unfolding newspapers, shoelaces, key rings with 6 to 15 keys, under and over seems to be okay. Birds I love. Peregrine falcons are straight up baller. Maybe we just have some amazing ones, but damn if these guys aren't the greatest. Nothing spooks them, not overly aggressive, and tolerate a lot, especially during camp season. Also incredibly smart. They learn routines very well and seem to be very perceptive. We try and train all resident birds for their safety and for for our own. For example, most of our animals have to go to a specific perch and display a desired set of behavior, equivalent to sitting quietly before we drop food off. By far, these guys are the fastest to pick this up and other behaviors usually, and the best at complying. Barn owls. We don't get too many and only have 2 resident birds, but I love these guys. Very quiet and pretty tidy compared to others who destroy everything. Bald eagle. Here's a bonus. Cheetahs are the most disgusting of all the big cats. They destroy everything in their enclosures and will sit and roll around in their own mess. Zebras are douchebags. I have actually also heard that zebras have really awful attitudes. I work at a safari park and we have a bat cave. They're all Egyptian fruit bats in there, and for the most part they're perfectly fine around humans, bar a little anxious if I try to get too close to them while they're sleeping. One bat, however, is a right pain in my butt. His name is Clayton, and he's constantly hanging on the exit, which means I have to get him off it so people can leave safely. Unlike all his fellow bats, he doesn't fly away the moment I get too close to him. Instead, I have to literally poke him until he does go away. Yesterday, he was chilling in his usual spot by the exit while eating a piece of pear. I poke him to get off and move as usual, and the little poo squeaks at me, which is bat for sod off. Frickin' Clayton, man. I'm a zookeeper in Colorado. It's hard to pick favorites because I really enjoy working with so many species, but I'll tell you about a few. African black-footed penguins are adorable and all have their own personalities, so they're really fun to work with. Most of the unpaired females are also very affectionate towards their keepers, and it's always the best when they follow you around and flirt. North American river otters are also one of my favorites. They're cute, smart, and really interactive. They play with most of the things we give them and recognize us when we call or are standing outside the exhibit. One of our older females will swim next to you at the exhibit glass and follow and chase you if you move around. Some bears are hilarious and also really smart. They like to climb around and will figure out where food is no matter where you put it. Every morning, I walk up to their holding and greet our male by blowing gently in his face. That's how they say hello. Ring-tailed lemurs have great personalities and have the added bonus of being adorable. They will also follow you around and sit next to you when we're weeding their exhibit. When I have treats, they will hold your finger and ask nicely to get one. We had one young male who had no concern for personal space and would hold my shoulder, tapping on my arm and trying to pry open my hand for treats if I was sitting down. They also make the cutest noises of any animals ever, in my opinion, and they are always cuddling with each other. I can't really think of any animals I hate taking care of, but if I have to choose, squirrel monkeys are really gross. They poop everywhere, propping walls, ceilings, and super grabby. I've had my hair pulled a few times, but luckily they're small enough to not cause the kind of damage an ape or larger primate could. They're still fun animals though, and I'm happy to work with them. I worked at a marine rehabilitation center in Costa Rica for a year. The sharks were cool dudes. Worst they would do is grab the feeder stick and not let go, which makes it really hard to keep feeding them, but you can't really negotiate with them. The caiman were alright, but I never did find a way to hang the meat piñatas that didn't break the rope or break the tree branches over the enclosure, which was frustrating to me and the caiman. The sloths are not bad, but they can move very fast if you make them angry. Those claws will open you up something fierce, like down to the bone. It didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen to another employee. The males will fight each other given the chance, and holding and touching them is so very uncomfortable because they are literally just flesh bags of skin and bone. But the sea turtles were the biggest jerks you could ever imagine. Let me share some stories with you. Our turtles were lazy, spoiled pricks. You had to drop the food directly into their mouths and try to avoid getting bitten, or else they would let it fall to the bottom of the tank, at which point you had to walk back into the building and get a net to scoop the food and try to feed them again. They would not die for it. We had one turtle in a 90,000-gallon tank. You could imagine it would need to be cleaned, and the only way to do it was with a snorkel. Our turtle, Mario Fernando, would swim up and bite my butt for fun while I was cleaning the tank. This species of turtle have beaks, and a bite to the butt hurts like a mother. Plus, it required medical attention from the town doctor that laughed like crazy and took pictures of my turtle-chewed butt for his friends and Facebook. No, Costa Rica does not abide by IDOWorkHereLady laws. So I would have to attempt to clean the glass on the tank and always watch for that little prick to be sure he wasn't anywhere near me. He would also float and play dead all the time to lure me into checking on him, then, you guessed it, bite my butt. But the worst turtle we had was Shenanda. Shenanda lived in a big round tank outside that would get filthy. They are filthy creatures. The tank had a big PCV drain in the bottom that stuck up about 3 inches higher than the bottom of the tank, and the only way to clean the tank was to drain all the water out and then use a push broom to shove the gunk and poop down the drain. Shenanda thought the tank cleaning day was her day to get revenge for everything that had ever gone wrong in her life thanks to humans. So the first time I got told to clean her tank, my co-workers hand me thigh-high plastic waders and the broom and show me how to begin draining the tank, then head to lunch. I set all this in motion, and when the water is low enough, I hop into the below-ground tank with Shenanda, but I notice she is swimming around the drain a lot. Whatever, I let her do her and start scrubbing the tank's walls. Eventually, the water gets low enough that it is almost falling below the drain when I hear a suction noise. Shenanda has allowed herself to be suctioned to the top of the PVC drain, and she is giving me the stink eye and flapping her flippers like she's upset that she's stuck. So now I am standing in ankle-deep turtle poop in plastic boots in the Costa Rica sun, sweating to death and trying to figure out how to safely, without getting bit, move a 150-pound plus snapping sea turtle off this drain so I can finish cleaning her tank. Everyone that could help me move her is at lunch. I am pretty much alone in the park except for the admin and office people, and no way are they climbing in to help me. Worst of all, I realized I had forgotten my ladder, so I couldn't even get myself out of the tank to get help and find shade or do something about the situation. You might be thinking this is a one-off thing, but it wasn't. Shenanda would suction her butt to the drain every single time I cleaned that tank for the year I worked there. She knew exactly what she was doing. Also, birds of prey smells terrible, like musty death. Well, I kinda don't blame Shenanda for feeling that way when you gave her that name, and it basically is close enough to shenanigans. Welcome to Shenanda's Shenanigans! Not a keeper, but I was an intern at the zoo for several years. Some of my favorite animals to work with were the polar bears, the rhino, and the big cats. The bears and cats were just staggeringly awesome. Big, beautiful creatures I'd only seen in movies and pictures before, not 15 feet from me. It always took my breath away to be that close and care for those sorts of animals. The rhino was just a big old goofy guy. He played fetch, he ran up to you for treats and scratches, and honestly was pretty similar to a dog. That rhino could always put a smile on my face. Least favorite? The birds and greater apes. The birds were mean, loud, and smelly. I have scars on my knee from penguin bites because I wasn't feeding them fast enough. They just crap everywhere, and you get to scrub it off the rocks for hours. I know that it's part of the deal with being an intern, but it made me pretty much hate those birds. The greater apes, aside from the orangutans, just scared me. They're smart, stronger than us, but lack the compassion and humanity we have, and you know it when you work with them. If there was ever an animal I was truly afraid of, it was the chimps. I flat out refused to work with the mandrills after the first day. That being said, the chimps bonded incredibly well with their actual keepers, and more than once came to keepers for comfort. At one point, our male chimp got out, was stuck in a tree, and his keeper went out and held hands with him while leading him back to the enclosure. That poor man had to take 2 weeks to mourn when that chimp passed away a few years ago. They were really close. Volunteered at a zoo for a few years. The giraffes were the easiest cleanup, except for rainy days. The lemurs were sweet and you could feed them by hand, either by putting food in their faces or in their little hands. The barnyard animals were fine, although the sheep would walk uphill from me and boo at me like Welsh nightclub goers. The camels would chill. No, they don't spit. The ones there never spit. I was told that when you beat them or terrorize them, they will vomit on you, and that's what's called spit. These guys never had a bad day. The worst was an elephant with PTSD. She tried to murder several keepers and would throw rocks at them while I observed her and her crew. I'd hold a clipboard and do observation. The chimps were the most dysfunctional family I'd ever seen, and I grew up in Mafia, Brooklyn. They had a bobcat who spent his days napping. I liked him and noticed the keeper had no problem going in the cage and tidying up around his sleeping form. He'd get up for chow and to play with some toys and then go back to sleep. Not a zookeeper, but when I was in high school, the seagulls would attack people during lunch. Our school was like a small college campus. They would fly by in the hundreds from the middle school a few miles away because we were disgusting and left trash everywhere. They knew when our lunch period was and came every day. At first, we tolerated them, and they would generally avoid people, but then they weren't afraid of us anymore, and were more of a cleanup crew. After a year of this, they began to harass people for food, so we fought back, swinging our sweaters and backpacks at them. No one ever got one. And for some time, there was this sort of Cold War where the birds would just watch us eat and surround the schools, but would never come down until everyone was back in class. Human and bird relations were finally broken when they carpet-bombed the entire school, Pearl Harbor style. Feces rained down on people as they ran for what little cover there was. My friends and I watched in horror from one of the few places that had cover as people became peppered with white shot. The bathrooms were jammed with people lining up to clean themselves, while others left entirely. We didn't go outside for weeks until the horde moved on. Didn't really fit the criteria, but it was funny nonetheless, I can give it that. A wallaby named Wallace is my favorite animal in the world. Don't tell my girlfriend, but I like him more than our dog. He likes only me out of the 4 of 5 handlers he encounters. The birds are the worst. They've become aggressive with the staff since a particularly combative bird joined the big exhibit area. It's like they've learned that the other keepers and I pose zero threat. I got a few scrapes trying to get away from some flamingos a couple days ago. It's frowned upon to fight back against the animals, even if it's only restraining an attack. I've heard stories of keepers getting fired for doing so. I actually had to omit some of that stuff because this person was just talking about things that, just was not necessary, like things with his girlfriend. It's like, where's this coming from? I just want to hear more about Wallace the Wallaby. Not a zookeeper, but I once helped take care of elephants at a summer camp in Florida. We made toys for them, which mostly included giant leaf balls covered in peanut butter and assorted nuts and fruit. Watch elephants scramble around it, frantically licking the ball as it rolled around in the dirt, was quite an experience and had to be one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Love those big beasts. I interned at a zoo last summer as a vet tech and a keeper. I was able to work with the kangaroos, wolves, coyotes, eagles, Andean condors, as well as the farm and education animals. One afternoon, another intern and I went to go clean and feed the condors' enclosure. These birds are like 3-foot-tall vultures with a decent-sized wingspan. In order for us to go in, we need to get the male into his indoor enclosure because he can get aggressive. However, the female is quite tame. This task alone can be hit or miss, depending on how he feels. He is pretty smart, so we have to open it up and sit on the other side, enticing him with some raw meat or fish while calling him in. He will slowly walk in front of the indoor enclosure, eyeing us and the meat. Some days he will perch on a big rock that's sitting directly in front of the indoor enclosure, knowing there is food there, but still ignoring us. Luckily, this particular day he decides to come in and we close him off. Then we head in to clean the outside exhibit, grabbing our tools and trays of meat. As we're finishing up, the female condor decides to accompany us to the door. While we're exiting, she then finds my co-worker's phone in her back pocket to be very interesting. She then latches onto the back pocket, and I start to grab a rake to try and sway her off my co-worker. All the while, my co-worker is starting to freak out a bit, slightly trying to get away with this condor attached to her back pocket. The condor does let go soon afterwards, and we laugh it off once the adrenaline wears off a bit. I'm not a fan of the reptiles or cockroaches that I had to feed, and the small mammals weren't my favorite, but I like the ferrets, and the 15 goats we had pooped a lot. I used to work at a safari park in Scotland. Generally, most animals were sound. I quite enjoyed this one little feared beast called an Anoa. They are basically big dog-sized cows and live in pairs. This one had a bad reputation because it was seen as mean. However, the poor thing never did anything bad to me, and I liked spending time with it. I even snuck it in a few apples from time to time. It was separated from all other animals because one day it had gone under a camel and stabbed it repeatedly in the belly with his horns. So they tranquilized the Anoa and his partner to move them, but she died, and so he was alone. Poor wee dude. Worst overall was Chippy the chimp, who was a complete bellend and went out of his way to show it to everyone. He would eat the other chimp's favorite foods, even though he didn't even like them. Bit of a wee prick, our friend Chippy. Most feared animals in the park, though, were the otters. Sweetest little chirps when they're hungry, but clever, fast, and bitey as heck. I have never jumped so high as when I was in their enclosure, giving them things to play with when the food ran out to distract them. And they realized I was in there with them, and they came bolting after me. Must have cleared 6 feet. I did a 6-month work experience in a small zoo in the UK. The best animal to look after was a big tegu called Reggie. Watching him eat dead rats was morbidly fascinating. The worst animal to feed were the Humboldt penguins. The greedy little sods would bite my shins every frickin' day. I'd come home with a ring of purple bruises just below my knee. If you do happen to love penguins and are near Edinburgh Zoo, anytime you can see, take a march around the park at lunchtime. I think one of them is a member of the Norwegian army for some reason. He has a little medal for his flipper. It's adorable. Damn, this was 7 years ago, so I can't really confidently say whether or not that's still there, because I'm like, yeah, I'll go to Edinburgh Zoo to see a little medal on a penguin. That sounds cool. I worked at a large pet store that had many exotic pets and was kind of like going to the zoo, minus the lions, tigers, bears, etc. I worked in the reptile room and definitely had my favorites. Pretty much all of the lizards, except lecker geckos, were chill. The little snakes we had were rude. It was a gamble of if you were going to get bit whenever you had to stick your hand in there. It didn't hurt, but was annoying. The gopher snakes and tree boa you also had to watch carefully. On the other hand, the pythons and sand boas were docile. A large caiman iguana bit half of my thumbnail off, which was really disappointing because I was the only one that would go in her room and spend time with her. Sometimes the things we love hurt us the most. Honestly, I love working with all of them. Sloths are definitely one of my favorites as far as hands-on goes. I love working with big cats and grizzly bears because they have a lot of character. Big cats are seriously just house cats, but bigger. Penguins are fun to work with, but they are the worst to clean up after. They eat fish all day, which makes their poop acidic and smelly. It gets everywhere and destroys the paint on the floor. A donkey once bit my fish at a mall petting zoo. I still like donkeys, though. They're cool. True words were never said. Obligatory, not a zookeeper, but my answer for both are horses. I was a ranch hand for 2 years in college and discovered you could tell a horse's personality and intelligence by how they kept their stall. Dirty and disgusting stall typically means the horse is a butthole and doesn't respond well to direction. We also housed other horses, and if you're wondering, ponies all have a Napoleonic complex and are douchebags. Also, I can never eat A1 steak sauce again because of that job. TLDR, don't be a ranch hand, kids. People who saved all of their money at a young age instead of living, and now are 50 plus years old. How are your lives today? Do you regret your life choices when it comes to the money aspect? We scrimped for decades. Our house is paid off. We have one car payment for 3 more months. We have no credit card debt. Our retirement savings are ahead of schedule. Next week, we head to Iceland for my 52nd birthday. Totally worth it. Nobody wants to be 75, sick, and too poor to quit working, no matter how much fun you had as a 20-something. I did mostly stupid things in my early 20s, but I always put at least 15% of my income into 401ks with matching benefits. After 24 years living the corporate middle manager cube life, we had the means to purchase a wholesale nursery, and now I'm a flower farmer. I just walked through my greenhouse with my dog with a cup of coffee, and I do not regret a penny of savings. Losing my job as a fairly well-paid engineering manager in the defense industry and having to sell my house during the housing crash in the early 90s ended up, in retrospect, being a defining moment in my current financial well-being. It took roughly 6 years to get back to anywhere near my former career trajectory after landing a good position in the cellular industry. Once brunt, twice shy, my wife, a registered nurse, and I bought a home that was about half the price the bank said we qualified for. Our reasoning being, if one of us lost our job, most likely me again, because nurses, we wouldn't have to lose our home again. Fortunately, that never happened. We were both able to advance in our careers and were able to pay off our mortgage in 7 years, fully fund our son's college education, max out our IRA contributions, and have literally no debt. My wife just paid cash for a Subaru Forester, not the fanciest of cars or a status symbol by any means, but she loves it. Today is literally my last day at work before I voluntarily retire early at the age of 58. I feel like this is for the most part going to be very one-sided, except for people who have had just rotten luck in finances or maybe property investment or something like that, or bad tenants. We lived far below our means for nearly 30 years, saving all the money we could, bought a nice piece of property in the woods and started building a house, paid for construction out of our savings, took years to build, ended up with our dream house with no debt at all. Early 50s, I work in my profession part-time and my wife gardens, almost retired, totally worth it. While we were in savings mode, it didn't seem like we were sacrificing. Still had a great time with life, just drove cheaper cars and lived in a small house. Took vacations to visit friends instead of going to resorts. Living within our means meant we had no money worries after we got out of our 20s. I didn't live while at college. While all of my friends went to university and are in mountains of debt, I went to a junior college to get all of my basic classes out of the way, and then went part-time to university, which was cheaper and I could afford it while working a part-time job. It was a local university, so I had to live with mom and dad until I was 26, which sucked and I missed out on a lot of independence that comes with going away to school, but it was worth it. I graduated in 6 years with my BA instead of 4, but with no debt. Without a monthly student loan, I was able to pay off my car quickly and can afford a lot of other things, phones, computers, vacations, tools, Legos, etc., without worrying about where the money will come from. My wife and and I live comfortably. She did the same thing, and we currently have a house, a 3-year-old, and newer cars. I survived cancer surgery. All of those have been paid off except for the house, which will be paid off 10 years before it's due. We currently have 30 grand in checking and 42 grand in savings, in large part because we sacrificed when we were younger. Point of reference, 55 years old. Did most everything the way you're supposed to. School, real jobs, lived conservatively, married, lowish tolerance for risk, yada yada. It depends on one's definition of living, but for the most part, most of my regrets are about not having lived or taken chances, or however you want to say it. It became apparent to me when I was an editor of a windsurfing magazine, and around a lot of the sailors we covered, I was the one with a steady job and paycheck. A wife, I owned a home, drove a decent car. These guys were drifters. Irresponsible couch surfing, earning poverty wages, teaching windsurfing at various vacation destinations when they weren't competing. Most traveled around with pretty much everything they owned, their gear and clothes, and lived with their parents some of the time and friends and folks they met on the road at other times. Rarely did these guys have health insurance or more than a couple $100 to their name at any one time. Yet these losers on the fast track to nowhere spoke multiple languages, traveled the world, and experienced things that I never did or will. Plus, if I compared notes with any of them now, 15 plus years later, our lives probably wouldn't be all that different. It's not like I'm some multi-millionaire or saving lives or changing the world. I'm just a regular schmuck with a regular job like most of them likely are. But when we reflect, they've got a crap ton more cool stuff to remember than I do, much of which probably shaped them to be as cool now as I thought they were back then. I'll be 50 in February. I was a workaholic in my 20s and 30s and tried to save money, in that I didn't travel, take vacations, buy new cars or new clothes, etc. I missed out on 2 women who could have been great wives and mothers and instead married an insane person at 34. It took me a decade and her adultery for me to realize I could never change how her brain worked. She had 3 diagnosed conditions, and I finally got out. Now I'm too old to remarry or have children, and due to bad luck and 2 recessions, I have little to show for it. Although I do live in a nice house because my father left it to me when he died. I'm a tad regretful that I didn't live when I was young and had more energy. Many of my friends did and still do get into relationships and travel, have children, and live life to the fullest. I'm getting to the point where I don't have the will to try again. This is the first time I have written this publicly. Definitely unfortunate about the crazy wife. I don't think you're going to find anybody in this thread that says, "Oh boy, I wished I had lived a little more in my 30s and now my spouse is dead and it was all a waste." What you'll find are people who lived the life they wanted to live. If traveling the world wasn't important at age 21 or 50, I doubt it will become hugely important at age 51. And if it does, awesome for them. The world has changed a lot in the last 30 years and they'll have different experiences than someone who, say, traveled, partied, spent money earlier in life. Each has its own pros and cons. Not to be a negative Ned here, but I just want to point out that all the savers who died before being able to spend their nest egg won't be commenting for obvious reasons, although I'm sure their next of kin were grateful. I'm a 27-year-old that saves and invests more than 50% of my income, so I'll probably be the kind of person you're referring to around 50 or so. I think the relationship between living and spending need not be so highly correlated. I think many people have consumerism addiction where they need to buy a product to get a dopamine hit, whether the product adds to their life in a meaningful way or not. I live in a cheap apartment, drive a used car, eat food I make mostly myself, go on long hikes on trails where I'm not charged, train for and compete in marathons a couple of times a year, surf, never buy a new board. There's no reason why living needs to be so expensive that it results in no money being saved. The routine for many people seems to be work plus suffer, purchase product to feel relief, put product in garage amongst the other thousands of things you don't use, bank and investment account remains at $0. This is not a good cycle. Nah, wait a minute. He's got a point. Yeah, I definitely nominate this one so far as the best one I've heard. I'm an aging Gen Xer and it was totally worth it. House is paid for, so the mortgage money goes to investment, kids, and fun. My wife was able to quit her job and stay at home since one salary was enough now. She may go back to work just to keep busy and because she wants to. We almost never paid interest on anything except the mortgage when we had it. Credit cards paid in full each month. We saved to buy cars and never financed them. We also keep cars for 10 to 20 years to maximize their value. My wife is a fanatic couponer and saved hundreds every month. She also just knows her prices and knows a good deal. So when it's time to spend, we spend wisely. I also insist on quality, so we will spend more if something is worth it. Additionally, we paid off the house in 10 years rather than 30. Between the cars, house, and credit cards, we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on interest, which all went to investments. We max out our 401k contributions each year. IRA for wife now. I know things are harder now, and I feel for the millennials who want to do what I did but just can't. I work with many of them. I'm the old guy at work, and they are great people. All smart, aware, and hardworking. I don't see the entitled thing at all. Maybe I live in a bubble, but this generation is pretty cool. Learn from parents who grew up in the Depression with 6 children. We were still able to live below our means and never felt like we were going without. If you use your imagination, there are plenty of things you can do for free and have fun. We made it a point to set aside part of my check first into a retirement account. My wife did not work, but worked hard staying home with our kids and housekeeping. Paid off the house in 17 years instead of 30 and actually retired early. All our children are self-sufficient, and we are worth well over 7 figures. The funny thing is, even with all this money, we still don't splurge, but have everything we need. I think the trick is to realize the difference between needs and wants. I have to thank my parents for this. We always asked ourselves, do we need this or want this? Also ask yourself if you can buy this used. We have always bought used cars with cash and kept them until the wheels fell off. We also gave generously to local charities as we felt so fortunate. So here's my deal. Retired at 52 but got killed earlier with a bad divorce and still managed to retire early. I've been sailing a yacht for 7 years now, halfway around the world. How? Absolutely put a minimum of 20% of your gross income away. If you can't get most of that into a tax-deferred account, you should be looking at 25 to 30%. Cold hard reality, no magic, and no wishing. That's a big chunk of your income. If you haven't started it, it will hurt too much, so you'll likely fail. I always advise you start with what you can manage, then increase it when you get a raise, as in up your savings by at least half of the raise, get to 20%. Get that money into the market while young. Try to get it automatically deposited into your retirement account so you don't see it, so you're not tempted. Other tips: get out of debt. Debt equals slavery. Never borrow unless you must, as in a house, buy a car that you can afford to pay with cash. Save for it if you must. It's an old concept, but credit is for the weak and those who will work into old age. Face it, you're a working stiff. The only time you pay yourself is when you invest in your freedom, your retirement. All other expenditures prolong your enslavement.
Yeah, man, we're all nothing but sleeping slaves for the government, man.
I'm 44, so I'm not 50 plus yet, but I've invested mostly 401k, as much as I could afford since I started my first real job in 1994. As long as the economy doesn't do another 2008 anytime soon, I'm on track to retire by 55, maybe a year or two earlier with some luck. We simply don't live like we've got a lot of money. My wife's car is a 2008 Kia. Until a few months ago, I was driving a 2000 Saturn. I bought a 2013 Chevy Volt, used, and love it. I love not having to pump gas all the time, and I end up spending less to drive that way. Electricity is cheaper than gas. I gave my 2000 Saturn to my daughter to have something to drive at college. My eldest started college this year, and while she will have a little bit of student debt, a couple thousand each year, we'll probably pay it off once our mortgage is paid off in a year or two. It was more of a cash flow issue than anything. The original plan was to have the house completely paid off by the time the eldest started college, but we had a couple of years where we had to stop paying ahead on the mortgage due to the unexpected medical expenses. So now we're a little behind schedule on that. When we were looking for houses 15 years ago, the realtors were trying to get us to buy houses based on what we could afford, which meant that they were trying to get us to buy McMansions. I had to fire one realtor because she wouldn't stop, even after we told her we weren't interested in anything beyond 2.5 times my annual salary. So yeah, we could be living in a house that's valued at 2 or 3 times the one we live in, but then I wouldn't be retiring at 55. Honestly, it's all about delaying gratification and intentionally not choosing the most expensive thing you can afford. Our kids get 3 presents for Christmas, and none of them cost more than $30. That's better than my folks could afford, but it's not extravagant. I have work colleagues who spend $300 plus on their kids per Christmas. That's crazy to me. Our newest car until a month or two ago was a 2008. Many people won't delay gratification that long. They want a new car every 3 years. By taking care of what you have, it can last a lot longer. My eldest is driving the 2000 Saturn, and despite having 120,000 miles, it looks and runs like new. I learned to do regular maintenance myself, changing brakes, fluids, tires, even replaced the air conditioning compressor with one from a junkyard years ago. That Saturn has never had anything other than synthetic synthetic oil, things like that. You take care of stuff, it lasts a long time. And don't be so prideful that you have to have new stuff all the time. I mean, is impressing your neighbors that important to you that it's worth an extra 15 years of work? Not to me, it isn't. Based on how things are sitting right now financially, we're on track for compounding interest to take over within a decade and match our income from working. At that point, we won't be able to spend it all unless our taste changes dramatically, and I wouldn't expect that. Once we reach that point, it'll just be a matter of slowly shifting all the investments to lower and lower risk, like rental income, bonds, and money markets, until the income stream is pretty safe, and then I won't work anymore. Okay, I'm craving a different perspective on this now. I'm 46 and don't really have much of a retirement. I was a teacher in the South and mostly just lived paycheck to paycheck, just getting by. But this isn't really about me, although I'm sure the circumstances has colored how I view money and savings. My two sisters and I grew up poor, although we really had no idea just how poor we were. My father worked a factory job with all of the overtime he could get while my mother stayed home with us till we were in 5th grade. My father had refused to allow her to work before marriage. My mom worked and lived with her parents, saving virtually every cent she made for her future home. After marriage, my father decided to spend her savings on a 2-bedroom trailer to sit on my grandfather's property instead of investing in the home of which my mom had always dreamed. Years went by and the house they had hoped to build no closer, and the trailer falling down about our ears. They had the house plans but no money to build, and my father refused to take out a loan, insisting that they pay for it as they could. At this point, after countless arguments, my father agreed to allow my mom to return to work. I was in 5th grade. I remember watching our house slowly take shape behind the trailer. Mom had promised we could have a sleepover when it was completed. We moved into the mostly complete house my sophomore year of high school, but much work remained and still remains. My mother died of pancreatic cancer when she was 53, having never seen her house completed or driven a new car. She saved and scraped her entire life and never got to enjoy the things she most wished for. This was nearly 25 years ago. So yes, I understand the necessity of saving, but more so, I understand the importance of spending and enjoying life while you have it. I'm 30 and saved to a fault until I started my own company 3 years ago. I'm already considerably way ahead of my peers and have opportunities to get in deals that most wouldn't be a part of. The first 100K is tough, but compounding interest is a real thing. I have always lived well below my means, and the freedom I have now is completely worth skipping the 2K spring breaks during college. I wasn't sure the saving would be worth it, but it absolutely, completely is and was. I don't save as much anymore because my net worth is mostly tied to my business. I still save more than most, but not 50 to 70% of my income like before. When I lost $35K in a month of business ownership, saving $3 on coffee seemed a bit trivial. Bonus, it's true. Money won't make you happy. Not having money will make you unhappy. But having 1 million instead of 500K isn't really life-changing. I plan on making a lot more because I enjoy creating value, and that's how capitalism works. I don't think anyone needs more than 10 million, but that's just me. 300K guaranteed a year in interest and dividends without touching the principal, it's pretty good living. Spending $1,000 a day for the rest of your life would be exhausting. My opinion has changed before, but I value my time more than money now. Getting from 10 to 100 million seems like a whole lot of work and risk and stress for not very much change in lifestyle. I have employees making well above 70K magic number and they're still broke and trying to keep up with the Jones. Living paycheck to paycheck seems horrendous. Your 45K truck doesn't make me think you're cool. It makes me think you're stupid. Minimalism solves a lot of problems. Spend on what makes you happy, not on what other people might think of you. Buy quality over quantity and always live below your means. When I first started as a nurse, I had a patient who was in his early 50s. I was his nurse for 3 days in a row and got to know him and his family relatively well. The background is him and his wife had saved all of their lives so they could retire early and comfortably, working pretty long hours and sacrificing experiences so they could eventually enjoy retirement. They had retired 6 months prior to his hospitalization and had bought a large house and an RV so they could travel across the USA. Shortly after retiring, he had started acting odd and they went in for a checkup. He was found to have a large glioblastoma and was given a life expectancy of about 7 months. He had already started having personality changes and the wife was in tears most of the time, at least when I had him. At the end of my shift on my last day, she gave me a hug and told me that she would have done things differently if she could. She said she wished she would have worked less and enjoyed life more rather than always looking forward. She whispered, "All the money in the world doesn't matter if you don't have anyone to spend it with." I remember seeing his obituary a few months later, but the moment really stuck with me. My my wife and I are saving a lot now, but we're making sure not to restrict ourselves too much because who knows? Life is too darn short. Even though it really sucks that guy died before he could use the money or do whatever the hell they wanted to do together, I think it's probably good to know that at least, your significant other is going to live relatively comfortably with the money that you saved, even if you can't enjoy it with them. It's a balance. It's very important to save money and invest early if you want to retire at a reasonable age. This doesn't have to mean living like a hermit. Learning to be more resourceful, less spendthrifty, and more self-reliant is not only great on the wallet, but I have found to be very rewarding. I'm scraping by in my mid-30s, had little extra income in my 20s that I used to travel and see things. Probably could have paid off my car with it, but I don't regret it at all. I could never have had the experiences I did and met the people I did if I had waited until I was 60, and I would have missed learning about the world and different cultures that has shaped who I am today. If you have the chance to do something, take it. We're all going to die and we're all getting old. Make experiences to make life fulfilling and worth living. You won't need to travel as much when you're old, weak, tired, and no fun. Old people who have lived full lives are happy. Those who haven't are miserable. I think I'm just going to refer to the other things and be like, no, you can still have fun and, spend your money wisely. You probably should have paid your car off, to be honest. But whatever. I was always worried about balancing the present with the future when it came to money. The odds are very good that you will live to a retirement age, so not preparing for it is foolish. That being said, it's no fun going through life only preparing for the future and not living when you're young and capable of doing so much. My solution, start a 401k type account as soon as you start your career. If there's a company match, ramp up the percentage to get the full match ASAP. Every time you get a raise, increase your contribution by 1%. Hopefully, your raise is more than 1%, and you will still see an increase in net pay. Never touch that money. Roll it over if you change jobs. Invest somewhat aggressively since you are in it for decades. No need to be timid. I topped out at 12%, but with pensions pretty much gone, 15 to 20% is more realistic. Most people don't understand the concept of compounding interest. The first few decades might not seem that impressive, but the last decade of your savings can amount to a crap load of money. Not necessarily about this topic. My first roommate at med school in the Caribbean was a nice guy who studied real hard. Never drank. I forced him to come out and party maybe once. He finished everything without taking any breaks. He got accepted to a great residency program with a dual specialty a few weeks before his 23rd birthday. I spoke with him around the time, and he had a head full of gray hair and put on a lot of weight from not working out. He said he felt like he was about to turn 43, and he looked like it too. He absolutely regretted not hanging out a little more while the rest of us looked up to him and his work ethic. It really is as simple as find a healthy balance. I am more the person that spent money on trips, going places, and doing things, but as I get older, I'm getting to that point where I'm like, yeah, it's time I start buckling down and putting my money in investments and all that stuff to try and, get ready for the future.
Parents, what is the most shocking thing you've heard, witnessed, or experienced upon meeting your child's new boyfriend or girlfriend? He recounted the story of when he drove home so drunk he lost a tire hitting something, then drove on the rim for at least 4 miles down the interstate. Thankfully, he's sober now, but is that something you want to talk about first time you meet me? Ex-girlfriend's mom greeted me with, "Did you convince my daughter to go on birth control so you could do her?" I was shocked to say the least because we had only been dating for a few weeks and she was a virgin. I wasn't pushing the issue because I really liked her. In my confused state, the GF at the time explained to me that she told her mom she wanted to do it with me and needed birth control. First encounter with her mom, and I never recovered from that. She hated me. A quote from my dad. "I didn't expect her to be black. Nothing negative, both my parents just didn't see it coming. When I was 16, I met this girl who went to high school across town through a buddy who was dating her friend. Our parents were pretty liberal and we spent most of our weekends getting high and drunk in the pool house and swimming when we wanted to cool off. Needless to say, it took about 3 days before I lost my V-card to this girl, and it was the awesomest. Here's the thing, when you're 16 and you find a girl who is DTF, you never let that go. I was immediately her boyfriend, despite the fact that I didn't know that much about her. I knew everything that I needed to know. She had a female port and she let me put my male port in it. Week 2 of this torrid romance, and something isn't quite right in the land down under. It was really burning when I took a wee, like every time. I went to Catholic school, so I knew all about how Satan invades extramarital SX and fills your lust pole with STDs. I knew I had one. The only question was which one. A lot of people asked, wait, this girl gave you an STD? You dumped her, right? Let me refer to the previous statement. I was 16 and she was letting me do it with her. We only got more serious, like getting close to meet the parents serious, but love didn't cure whatever evil was festering in my pants, and I had to schedule a doctor's appointment. In the exam room, I had to fess up to my doctor, who I had always suspected of secretly being gay. My terrible suspicions that I had third-degree wee-wee rot with a chance of AIDS. I had to pee in a cup and he manually examined my no-no area. He asked me why I suspected I had caught an STD, and in the spirit of doctor-patient confidentiality, I told him everything, which came out to, I met a random girl from across town and I've been doing it with her everywhere. Pools, bushes, suburbans, rugs, carpet, dirt piles. I don't know much about her, but if she's willing to do it with me, she's probably kind of a lady of the night. It took me a week, but the results came back. I had a benign UTI, most likely from bareback riding in dirt piles. Clean it up was his advice. That was the giant relief, and a big F you to Sister Helen, who had convinced me that God punishes all fornicators with a lifelong curse of phallic fire. Everything seemed to be great. The down under problems cleared up, and this girl and I kept seeing each other. After a few months, she invited me to her family dinner. Her mom was nice and pretty hot. Her dad was my doctor. I could leave it there just because I think the story ends where it should, but for those who want some Animal House style wrap-ups, here it is. All in all, it was super awkward because it took me a while, months, to believe that he wasn't just watching for the right time to confront me about it. I couldn't look him in the eyes, and I couldn't look her mom in the eyes because I was staring at her chest, convinced that he had told her. But it turned out that her dad was super cool. He never even mentioned anything other than telling me that I should start seeing a different doctor. He let me drive his super nice car, and they took me on family vacations. They even let me sleep over in the same room as their daughter. As for the girl, we dated through most of high school. She was a year younger than me, so we broke it off when I went to college. She actually went to the same college that I did, and we got back together for a little while, but it didn't work out. I implied she was a woman of loose morals, but I would like to rescind that comment. I'll admit, once I read the bit where it's like my doctor was her father, I didn't believe it. I mean, this latter bit, it helps kind of like, cement and pull it together a little bit, but I'm still like on the fence about whether this is just a work of fiction. First time my mother met my high school girlfriend was walking into my bedroom with my girlfriend completely naked on the bed and me fully clothed on the computer. Nothing out of the ordinary here. I was the girlfriend in question. I'd come over to my long-distance relationship boyfriend's apartment on the way out of town. I had dressed in a plaid skirt, fishnets, combat boots, and a low-cut black tank because I wanted to leave him with a good memory. Things are getting saucy, downright dirty even, when suddenly his dad comes in. He'd come by early to take him to lunch and drop him at his job. I was absolutely mortified during the entire lunch with his dad, dad's girlfriend, and my boyfriend. I never thought I would strike a teenager until I saw a boy smack my daughter's butt in front of me with impunity. And I think any man or father would agree that you had every right to do so. My boyfriend in high school was a senior at a different school. I was a sophomore. At their school homecoming game, it was a tradition for all seniors to dress up in camouflage. So my mom first met him when he was dressed head to toe in black and white camouflage and wasn't aware of the tradition. As he was walking towards us, she said, "Oh, God, no," and didn't realize I'd heard her. To be fair, he was pure scum. As if coming out to my parents wasn't already shocking news, I told them a year later that I'm dating someone who's only a couple of years younger than my parents, and that I'm only interested in dating men far older than my age. We've been together for almost 5 years, married just 2 months ago, and my parents are now very accepting of us both. Strangely, they were more bummed out about me being gay than our age difference. Let's see, this goes back to 2007. First time my now ex-wife and I had met in person. Long-distance relationships are less socially stigmatic now than they were 7 years ago, but 5 years together, 2 of them married, were too much, and so she's my ex-wife. So we're sitting in a hotel watching an excellent post-coital episode of Burn Notice. Great frickin' show, yeah? Of course. When her phone rings, she picks it up, it's her mom. She says some things I really didn't understand at the moment because they seemed like gibberish, and they sighed and handed the phone to me, and this is the first thing I've ever heard this woman say: "Do you have a gun pointed at my daughter?" I fell over laughing. She'd worked out a code with her mom some years before when she left to go to college to have something like a safe word so that her mom could call the cops and save her. I actually think that's a great idea for people who have that kind of lifeline. That is a great idea, but imagine if that person is just not on point, doesn't remember the phrase or like what the topic is that you're supposed to say if you're in trouble, and they're just like, Okay, why are you talking about this stuff? What? That'd be awkward to say the least. I'm way too late to the game here, but that's all right. My grandfather graduated high school at 14 and started med school at 16. When he went on his first date with my grandmother while he was 16 and my grandmother was 14, he had to wait downstairs with her father as she finished getting ready. So my great-grandfather starts asking him all sorts of questions. Mainly, what does he do with his time? So my grandpa gives him the rundown. Well, I'm 16, I'm captain of the basketball team, I'm in med school right now, sir. My great-grandfather told him that he wouldn't have his 14-year-old daughter date a liar since there was no way he was 16 and in med school and the captain of the basketball team. He thought he was either lying about his age or lying about being in med school to impress him, so he kicked my grandpa out. My grandpa's mom had to call my grandma's dad to verify his story before my great-grandfather would let him come back to the house to take my grandma. Not me, but my oldest sister, then 19, asked if she could bring her boyfriend of a few months to my dad's 45th birthday meal. They said yes, and we were all excited to meet him. They were both over 30 minutes late, and the guy turned out to be a kid my dad was neighbors with and used to play with as a child. He spent the rest of the meal making jokes about how they knew each other as kids, and now he was boning his kid, and that they'd know the entire time about the connection and not bothered to give us any prior warning because they thought it would be funnier for my dad to find out this way. No idea how my dad managed to keep his cool. Some people just have zero class whatsoever. Not really on topic, but this is one for the parents who make snap judgments about kids' choices of who they date. This all started when I was 18. I'm now 30. I just graduated EMT training and was out with some friends celebrating, and this beautiful girl that had been in the nursing program at our school started chatting me up. I had spoken to her a few times at school, mostly hi, how are you, etc. Well, we ended up going on a few dates, mostly just dinners and movies, the usual, and she asks if I want to come with her to her family cookout. Well, obviously, I said sure, why not, and went to meet her family. I'll pause here to add that at the time I was 329 pounds, so not a small guy, and I'm 6'5". However, I had also lost almost 100 pounds before going to school with her, which she did not know at this point. I fought a thyroid disorder all through middle and high school and worked my butt off to get my weight under control and find the right medication so I wasn't just a fat lazy bum as some might call me. I knew from some of our conversations that this girl was really into physical fitness and the like. I told her that I was going to the gym and trying to lose at least 100 pounds, and she seemed encouraging and offered to even go with me. Well, the weekend cookout comes along and I meet the parents. We get there and everyone's outside cooking out and enjoying the pool, etc. I've never had body image issues or problems with my man boobs, so I take off my shirt and join in after meeting the parents and having what I thought was a good first talk. I notice while I'm sitting talking to one of her relatives, I think it was her uncle, that she's giving me these weird looks. Well, about an hour later I ask someone where the bathroom is, and when walking in the house to find it, I overhear this girl and her father talking in the kitchen. I'm not usually one to spy on someone, but I couldn't help myself. I figured the dad was telling her I wasn't good for her or something. I was right on both accounts. What I heard was, I didn't spend my life working hard and sending you to private school and buying you anything you desired so you could end up with some fat slob piece of crap like that out there. He has zero respect for himself. How can you expect him to respect you? Well, I was a little annoyed at this point, so I figured I'd back out and leave and call her later and see how she wanted to handle this, if we needed to call it quits or what. Before I could turn around though, I hear her reply, I only brought him home to make you and mom mad. I find him disgusting, but it's worth it to let you know you can't tell me what to do. Yeah, at this point, I'm really angry. Upon hearing this, I walk into the kitchen and let my feelings be known. I informed her dad that yes, I'm fat, but that I was 430 pounds just a year and a half ago, and still losing weight, and sorry I wasn't born with perfect genes that made me fit and perfect in his eyes. But as he stated, he worked hard to provide for his daughter. I worked damn hard to overcome my challenges and will continue to work on them. After that, I turned to the daughter and said I was glad I could be her token fat guy for the day, and if she'd pack me a few racks of ribs, I'd take my fat, happy butt home. Fast forward about 12 years and I had gone back to school and graduated with my paramedic certs. I'm at this time about 230 pounds. I'm still a big dude, but a lot of it's muscle now, and I just have a large frame to begin with. Well, I was on the ambulance and received a call for a patient in cardiac arrest. Went en route, hit the lights, and hauled butt to the call. Upon arriving to the scene, we are directed to the patient, and I honestly stopped dead in my tracks as I came round the corner and realized the patient was the girl's dad. After about a 2-second, well, doesn't life work in mysterious ways, pause, I immediately began intubating him, and my partner got our monitor set up while a fire crew member takes over compression. We work him for about 3 or so minutes on scene and decide to move him to the the truck. Once loaded and en route to the ER, I continued working on him in the box. After about another 4 minutes, I finally got a shockable rhythm and proceed to try and jumpstart his heart. Takes about 4 rounds, but finally get his heart in a normal sinus rhythm and get him to the ER. I turned him over to the docs and went back in service, just thinking about how much of a female dog karma was that Mr. Fit had a heart attack when I was the fat slob piece of crap, and how ironic it was that I'd be the one to respond to that call. Well, about a week later, I get a call from the hospital that a patient I brought in wants to thank me. After learning it was this gentleman, and he donates a large sum of money to the hospital, and getting the PR speech from the suits at the hospital, I'm thinking this is going to end bad. I made my way over to the hospital after a shift, and when I got to his room, I realized when I walk in he has zero memory of me. Not surprising since it was so long ago, but I have also changed a lot physically. He thanks me, I do the usual, it's just my job speech, etc. Well, I was thinking, cool, got past this, no drama, it's over, all good, not so fast. He proceeds to tell me it's frustrating that even guys like us in good physical shape that take care of themselves can still have heart attacks while there's people out there that eat anything they want, weigh God knows what, and still walk around with luck. That really ticked me off, but I held it for a while and said, yeah, but that's just the way life is, and try to work my way out of there. Just as I'm about to cut and run, it hits me. What can I say without being a total butt and really ticking off the doctors outside? As I'm walking out, I tell him, glad I could help him out, and it's not bad work for a guy who used to be a fat slob piece of crap. I turned around and walked out, but I noticed that little light of recognition in his eyes as I left. That was about 6 months ago, and I've received several messages from him since then wanting to meet and talk, but I've ignored them, as I really have no desire to hear what he has to say. At best, it's an apology for how he acted back then. At worst, he'll try and take me to task for being a butt to him, and I'm good without it either way. Moral, I guess, is always treat others how you want to be treated, as someday you may need them, or something like that. Words to live by, but you also can't hold on to crap that people have said to you over the years, because yeah, while it might be good if maybe you do get revenge or an opportunity to prove yourself to that person and show them that they were wrong about you, sure, that's good. But if you let it fester and you're thinking on these things that happened like years and years ago, like all the time, it can twist you up inside, no joke. My ex-boyfriend dropped a bag of booger sugar on the floor. He told my dad it was sugar because he was diabetic. My dad promptly told him to leave and never come back. That was the nice way I put it. He was not that nice. My mom didn't say a word, not the best time to say, but daddy, I love him, on my part, and then he asked me if I was on the booger sugar too. Not a parent, but my girlfriend met my mother last year for the first time. After my mother had a long discussion with us about the seriousness of texting and driving, due to some news program she watched, my mom just drops the serious talk and starts casual conversation with her. First thing she asks is, do you have any siblings? To which my girlfriend responded, I had a sister, but she died in a car crash. Now this was a complete joke, but my mom is not the humorous type. I literally cringed so hard. Not gonna lie, sounds like your girlfriend had a pretty good sense of humor. Started seeing who is now my ex-wife when after about a month and a half of dating, we got pregnant with our daughter. Met her and her parents at a restaurant for dinner to tell them that she was pregnant and what our plans would be going forward. Her father looks at me and the first thing he said was, Talon 74, why did you have sex with my daughter? Mind you, she was 21 at the time and I was 24. After a few seconds, I replied, she took off her shirt and asked me if I was going to do her or not. So I did. Followed by me immediately getting up and walking right out of the restaurant. Me, my ex-girlfriend, and her sister's friend were sitting outside on the back step getting ready to smoke the devil's lettuce. Her dad had recently left for a couple of weeks, and before he left, he said to me, don't do anything that you wouldn't do if I was around, and told him I would behave. Anyways, we're outside and her mom was at work, or so we thought. So I take the bowl and smoke, and her sister's friend goes, ah, crap. I turn around and there is my ex's mom staring at me with eyes of fury. As a punishment, she made me and my ex-girlfriend watch Pinocchio, and she grounded her for like a month. Anyone else heard that Snoop Dogg's apparently quit smoking the devil's lettuce? I'm waiting for that to be some kind of like campaign for some new product or something that he's making, I don't know. During my angsty phase, I brought home a guy with a safety pin through his eyebrow and a foot-tall blue mohawk. Within 5 minutes of entering my household, he managed to insult my mother's interior decorating skills and shoot my little sister in the eye point blank with a Nerf gun. We left before he could even meet my father, father, who would surely have ended up in prison for whatever he did to the dude. Happened to a uni mate. He went to pick up his girlfriend from the parents. They had been dating for a few weeks, and this was their first time meeting. Her house was on a reasonable hill, and while parking, he rolled back into the dad's car. So in his first few sentences to the parents, he had to explain that he had damaged their car, apologize, and then convince them to let their daughter get in his car to go to a movie. They let her go, and it became a running joke with the family. My family is very chill. Poop is discussed while eating and such. With this in mind, my 16-year-old brother brought home a fairly good-looking girl, tall, smiled a lot, outgoing, older. One of the first conversations we all have together after they go to his room to fool around is how they met 2 days before off of Tinder and only got together so that they could fool around for the summer before she left for college. Then proceeded to ask my mom to provide her with birth control as her mother would not. That happened. Talk about inappropriate dinner conversation. Also, there is a startling amount of people that aren't parents like talking about this stuff. It's all just kids talking about how their dates disappointed their parents. In my early 20s, after getting kicked out of college, I lived with my parents. The way their house is set up is a big staircase down, basically, in the middle of the house, which is almost completely open. There are no hallways in the house. Anyways, at the bottom of the staircase is the kitchen with an opening from where the sink is. Well, my mom has some weird sixth sense when she knows I have a girl over, and it is never the same one. This would typically happen on weekends. My mom would be washing dishes and yelling my name, saying, "Come down for breakfast." Only problem is there's a random girl in my room. 90% of the time, the chick would freak the hell out and be like, "Holy crap, how am I going to get out of here without meeting this woman?" My mom doesn't care one bit. In fact, she invited them to join us for breakfast. Sometimes I'd walk the girl down and say, "Hey, this is blah, blah, blah," but sometimes I'd send them down by themselves and they'd just dart out of the front door. God damn, those moments were frickin' priceless. My 17-year-old daughter had been talking to a friend of a friend on Facebook. He was supposedly in the army, just finished basic, and was at a base in Texas. One Friday night, he showed up at our house. We live in Missouri. He flew in to surprise her. She was surprised. I was mad. Asked him how long he was in town, where he was trying to stay. The punk kid used all of his money to buy his one-way plane ticket and take a cab to our house. I ended up driving this kid back to the airport, buying a plane ticket for him, and sending him back on his merry way. Turns out, he thought he would just not go back to his base and live at our house until my daughter finished high school. Yeah, not happening. She is 25 now, and we were just laughing about this last week when she and her husband were having dinner with us. That was one crazy, scary guy.
Yeah, I got a hard agree there. That sounds like a kind of terrifying event to happen in your life, some random dude showing up. Especially some weirdo that's just been casually chatting with your daughter for I don't know how many months.
My girlfriend, now wife, met my parents for the first time at my dad's surprise 60th. In her nervousness, she proceeds to get plastered and is repeatedly shushed by my mother during speeches for laughing too loud and long with my mom's friends. The next morning, she's hating life as she comes downstairs for breakfast. My older brother, who has the maturity of a 13-year-old boy, sees her in distress and proceeds to wave a platter of eggs and bacon under her nose. As she bolts for the bathroom, my mom, who has a long career in addiction fields, pulls me into the hallway and asks me, "Does she do this a lot?" A less than auspicious entry into my family. First time I met my ex's dad, we were sitting in front of the TV. Me, him, her, and her two younger sisters, and we were watching Hannah Montana. Just for the record, he turned to me and asked, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?" I replied awkwardly, I'm not sure, We totally were. Turned towards my ex and asked, Are we sleeping together?" She casually answered, not taking her eyes off of the TV, "Yes, Daddy, we're sleeping together." Direct. Confident, I presume. All good traits. What happened?
Escape room employees, what was the weirdest escape tactic you've seen?
I've learned not to make the final stage a lock with a key because damn if I haven't met some of the best lockpicks in the state. My family did an escape room and there was a room with a phone that connected to 3 other rooms. The door only opened when you dialed the right numbers on the phone, and so my sister just walked up and pressed redial and the last door opened. We have the record of 7.5 minutes to complete the room. My brother and I once got got out of a room by taking a magnet from the previous puzzle and using it to lift a key out of a small opening in a lockbox. There were 6 of us, and nobody could figure out the last clue, so we improvised. Got out with 3 minutes to spare. Pretty good, kid. I was told this by an employee. There were paper clips to unlock handcuffs. Someone stuck it into a functioning outlet. I don't think that guy was trying to speed run the escape room. Not an employee, but did a room with 2 friends where we got randomly placed with a family with 3 kids under the age of 12. The youngest was maybe 7. We were like, oh man, we're not going to get any help at all. Kids won't be able to solve anything, and their parents will have to keep track of them. But there was this one part where you had to solve a puzzle that would allow you to move a bookshelf on treads. There was a small gap through which you could see the key, but it was too small to get more than a few fingers through. Unless you're a small 7-year-old boy. He just popped his arm in there and grabbed the key. We bypassed a good 5 minutes of the room that way. Also, the kids ended up being delightful and pretty good at finding stuff. There was a group of people who were doing a space-themed escape room. In one of the rooms there was an astronaut suit, which was supposed to just serve as a prop, but one of the members thought that it might be needed to solve one of the rooms. So he ended up traversing through the entire escape room while wearing an astronaut suit. And no, it wasn't needed to solve anything. No joke, this is actually making me want to try an escape room. We had a room where you were supposed to translate this code into different words. We had a list of possible words, and then put them into a specific order. We weren't positive how to use the code translator. It was something with wheels, so instead we just used some common sense, like XCWWB is obviously going to be green, not purple. But the lock that was supposed to pop open when you got it right had already popped when we got in, so nothing happened. We asked for a clue and she made us use the actual code wheel because she assumed there was no way we could have gotten the words right without it. I worked at an escape room for about a year, but one group managed to always stay in my mind. It was a group of 4 women, maybe in their 50s, drunk out of their minds. They started off the room quite well with a pace that would allow them to escape, but then they encountered what we considered to be the easiest puzzle in the room. Basically, they get a long magnet and use it to pull a key out of a locked window. However, they, for some god-unknown reason, could not figure this out. After a bit of trying, they asked for a clue. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, remember that magnet stick you guys got? Some might call it the key to success. Simultaneously, they all sigh, which is a common reaction when people realize that an answer to a puzzle was so simple, but no, they didn't understand the clue. Instead, they shoved the book into the window in hopes of getting the key, which is something we specifically tell them not to do. Had to end up pulling them from the room as they started ripping apart the books. At a certain point, I am just sat here wondering, how much worse could I be than some of these people at these escape rooms? Working at an escape room, I have a lot of stories, but this one will forever be my favorite. It happened a little over a year ago now. A guy was wearing a baseball cap when he went into the room, and shortly after took it off and placed it somewhere. About 7 to 10 minutes later, he picked it up and started searching it for clues or hidden messages. His wife needed to remind him that was his own hat, and it actually took some convincing. He really didn't believe her at first. I work at an escape room in Sweden, and we use live actors in our games. One time when one of my colleagues entered in character, a group of people decided to grab him and tickle him so that he would let them out, because they thought that was a great tactic. Worst part is that when they got out the normal way, they were very proud of their actions and thought they were really funny. I abhor being tickled, so much, so I have a lot of sympathy for that worker. I'd be so angry too, you're just trying to do your job and a bunch of people start tickling you. Surely there are rules and regulations to these things. It's hey, don't bother the actors that we have working at this place, please. Our rooms had a lot of decorative touches, lots of pretty knickknacks just to enhance the mood. One of our rooms had a Victorian parlor, smoking room feel, and on the mantle was a small statue of a bird of some sort. One gentleman decided to pick up and carry the eagle for about 45 minutes. But guys, this eagle has to be for something. He tried placing it on things, opening it, using it as a key. Thank goodness he didn't try to use it to bang something open. When the group finally escaped, he was at the door and quickly asked me, "What was the eagle for?" "Oh, nothing. It's just for a decoration." He had done absolutely nothing to help his group progress. So he walks over and sets the statue down and lets out a heavy sigh. He seemed absolutely crushed. Meanwhile, the rest of his group was partying and celebrating their success. I get that. That is the worry, that you go to one of these things with a bunch of friends and no matter what you do, how hard you try, you end up contributing nothing to the team. That would be awful. I feel for this dude. I have tons of stories about destructive players, so instead, how about a weird and actually intelligent method? After my brief and video, the players started to run around the room, all talking out loud, not necessarily talking to each other. I thought that there was no way they were going to escape with how disorganized they were. Boy, was I wrong. One of the group members shouts, "Pumpernickel," and everyone else shuts up immediately. They continued to play like this through the rest of the game. Whenever one of them had either found something interesting or figured out an answer, they would shout "Pumpernickel," and immediately everyone else would give them their full attention. They got out in 30 minutes and 0 clues in a room with a 20% success rate, and average time to complete is 45 to 50 minutes. Definitely one of the better groups I've managed or seen. I worked on one where a roulette table was one of the answers. Now, we didn't want to rig a roulette wheel, so we gave the lock multiple answers. Now, this family comes through and plays it and gets double zeros, and they assume it's rigged to land on double zeros. Pretty common assumption. They spin it again, lands on double zeros again. I worked there for about a year, and I don't think I'll ever see something like that again. The family didn't make it out of the room, but they were extremely close. I had a friend who ran an escape room in an older house. She said she had a group that snuck in tools and disassembled the furniture, looking for clues, namely a metal child's bed and rocker. She had another group that peeled off a layer of wallpaper and punched a hole through the drywall. I also went through with a friend who tore a stuffed animal in half to remove it from a locked box instead of finding the key. Hearing about these, I wish they would do crazy stuff like that, like, let's insert a key in a teddy bear or something like that. That'd be cool, I guess. I mean, you gotta consider that you can't go around breaking all this crap, right? An employee told us this story. The room we went to was part of an older building, and there was an unused fireplace. A previous lady had opened the chimney flue, letting a dead bird, among other things, into the room. This lady thought the dead bird was part of the escape, and the employees had to inform her that it wasn't. I've built 2 escape rooms which we ran at conferences and events, guaranteed occurrences. 1. Someone rips something apart due to overenthusiasm. 2. Someone rips something apart because they came in drunk. 3. The meekest, quietest person in the group figures a puzzle out 20 minutes before everyone else and nobody is listening to them. 4. The smartest people never figure anything out. Hot tip, if you're going to be in an escape room, pretend you're dumb as poop. We never require you know advanced chemistry or have an IT background. All the pieces are in the room. If your first few guesses on a puzzle aren't it, don't sit there beating your brain on it. Hand it to fresh eyes. 5. Someone does the opposite of what the warning label says. If it's shaped like a laser pointer and has a giant do not point at eyes, guess where it's immediately going. 6. Since we show at conferences and take over other spaces, we don't have 100% control of this space. We will hang black curtains over things or put a label on something that says not part of the puzzle, and people still, with almost every run through, find something new. Like there was a label on an AC vent high on the ceiling, and somebody spent half an hour going, what does it mean? 7. Someone figures a puzzle out that spells out a clue, notices the clue, then disassembles it and forgets it. This behavior I do not understand. We had one puzzle where people had to connect strings to a point on a grid, and when all the strings were up, it spelled a 3-letter word. Groups would do this, notice the word, comment on it, then take all the strings off the wall. Then 10 minutes later, be going, this lock needs 3 letters to open it, and I'm screaming from the security camera room. 8. I built a puzzle that has a 30-second timer. If you don't solve the whole thing in that time frame, it resets. Once you know what to do, it's just button pushing. It's easy, but holy Christ, having a short time limit stresses some people out like crazy. Like screaming, it's gonna reset, oh God, at their teammates. That's just people getting real into the game. I mean, hell, me and my mates yell at each other when we play Mario Kart. We curse each other's names, but pretty sure that's typical of a regular Mario Kart game. Emotions get pretty high. Work in an escape room and we have a prison scenario. Shocker, I know. Set in the 1960s in Germany. Made to look authentically old, there is an old rusty toilet, obviously without water. Via the cameras, I could only see the back of the dude appearing to investigate the water tank above the toilet, only he wasn't. You might already guess where we're heading. This dude thought it was perfectly appropriate to wee into a prop toilet in a confined space. With 3 friends present in the same room, I lost my crap and had to throw the group out. There was a drawer that would activate a black light when you pulled it open. Group was pretty dumb and clueless, gave them a hint. You'll find something useful if you open a certain drawer. Naturally, they find the drawer and someone decides that it would be useful to grab the light bulb and rip it out of its socket. Entire room blacked out cause they tripped the fuse. Needless to say, they did not escape. In a clown-themed escape room with my friends, we found a coin which we found out was used later on in the room. There was a hole in the floor with a note that said, "Do not put the coin in this hole." We thought it was a trick or something, so we put the coin in there, only for nothing to happen, and we couldn't get the coin out. With all the notes and warnings that employees apparently put around the place, or have to say because otherwise people trash the rooms apparently, this doesn't sound quite as fun as I imagined. Former employee here. We always reminded our guests to be gentle and respectful inside our games. That force of any kind is entirely unnecessary. People have ripped handcuffs from tables and walls, used incredible force to rip open maglocked doors, somehow used a key from their own keychain to unlock a cupboard that is not meant to be unlocked at all. There is a phone in one of the games that cannot make any outgoing calls except to 911. There is a note on the phone asking people not to call 911, and we reminded our guests not to call 911, but it constantly happened. It was rare when it happened, but some kind of parallel thinking that led them to getting the right answer without any of the clues. It's pretty alarming when a door opens and it required a clue in another locked box. In the escape room I work at, I once had a party of older 20-somethings come in during a day out. They didn't pay much attention. I think some of them might have been a bit drunk, but I'm not sure, but they worked at a pretty good pace. In the room they were doing, they had to find a crank, a gear, and a handle in order to open a mechanical box that had the answer to the mystery they were trying to solve. We weren't allowed to lock the door for safety reasons, so before they even step in the room, I gave them a whole spiel about the rules and whatnot, and told them that anything that looks like it needs more parts to work probably does, so please don't force things. This box clearly has a part for the gear, and a part for the crank to attach to said gear on the side of the box. After finding the gear and handle, but having not found the crank yet, one of the dudes in the room just attaches the gear and with sheer force of his grip turns it without the crank and opens the box. I was just staring at the monitor open-mouthed in awe. I haven't seen anything before or after that could possibly top that experience. They ended up deciding to continue the room and try to find the crank after I informed them what happened, and they'd technically solved the room and had a blast. This is our extended list at work, basically meaning that people have done this crap at our venue and now we have to brief everyone with this list. Ceiling tiles and sprinklers are not part of the game. Do not kick holes in our walls. We do not keep clues in the plaster. Do not pull apart our phone. It is there for clues from the staff. It is not a clue itself. Climbing on top of our shelving and jumping onto a lockbox to break it open is not how you solve a puzzle. Kicking doors down is not permitted in gameplay. You are not Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do not place metal items in the power outlets. They are live and will kill you. These are the types of people who look at us with surprise on their faces when we have to repeat they are liable for the damages they make. I'm starting to wonder if some of these contestants got confused between an escape room with a rage room, I think they're called. You can just go in there and break whatever's in there with whatever you like. It's supposed to be really good for an anger outlet. Last week, a woman ripped a very large painting out of the wall. It was clearly marked "Do Not Touch" and screwed into the wall with anchors. One part of our game requires you to look up information in a textbook. We give the page number to help solve a puzzle. I've had 2 groups now waste 5 to 10 minutes solving the practice problem instead. Didn't know you could pick combination locks until a guy did it. If there is any kind of lock anywhere in an escape room, I can guarantee someone has tried to pick it. Drunk people in particular get pretty creative, usually not in ways that are beneficial to them. At least once a week we have someone ask if they can just make their way through the drywall. I know it's a joke, but I always keep a closer eye on those people. But we have our customers lock up their belongings in lockers prior to entering the rooms. It's important to note that the lockers are not assigned per room. Any player can pick any locker. The other day I had a group open up a locker cabinet which has the means to escape in it within the first 2 minutes in the room, and escaped right away. When I asked them how they escaped, fearing that we forgot to lock it during the reset, they let me know that they used their locker key to open it. Needless to say, we got new locks for our lockers. God, my boyfriend works in an escape room, and they tell you at the beginning, if you have to use force, then it's not meant to move. Then people literally rip lights, bookshelves, clocks, skeletons that were drilled into the walls right off. I think they spend close to a few $1,000s a month repairing crap they
told customers not to do. That sounds ludicrously frustrating if you were the business owner of that establishment. I had one team shut the magnetic secret door behind them, locking themselves in for no reason that was particularly dumb. In one of our rooms, there's an opening in the wall for a long tube that they're supposed to stick a magnet into and fish out a key. One team decided to drop the cryptex they were trying to open into it instead. That was fun to try and get out. One team of the two got to the end of the hour time limit without even solving the first puzzle. In another room, we have a mannequin hanging from a noose. My coworker watched one particular idiot put the noose around his own neck and climb onto the bench next to it. He got a real shouting at over the walkie-talkie for that moronic stunt. This job sounds like, I don't know, the second most infuriating jobs after maybe working in the stock market. A group came into this place and I went through everything. I was the only employee who was fluent in English, so I'd go through the rules. The rest of the staff are Russian and mostly speak Russian. Only one knows broken English, so she'd relay stuff to me if needed. Well, one day, as I said, this group came in. My boss and her friend, who were visiting, were discussing in high-speed Russian different parts of the escape room, how to get in and out and such. I assume no one can hear or understand them, so I go through the rules and such. I mention I'm also on a loudspeaker and such if they need help. The second they get in the first room, a guy goes, "You guys remember how I speak Russian? Want to set a record? I can hear you." Niet! Not necessarily an escape tactic, but when telling the group the rules and what to do, i.e. don't go in the ceiling, they almost always think you're just trying to misdirect them. Please do not, under any circumstances, mess with the fire detection and alarm system. Somehow translates to, there is definitely something hiding in the functioning smoke detector. They were not happy with the bill for the fire department getting called after they ripped it out of the ceiling. If I go to an escape room and ever do something this stupid, I'm probably going to come back on here and be like, well, I did it. I fell victim to my own stupidity and I paid for it. All of my judgments of other people in this specific topic were unfounded and, well, I was no better. There was one person who ripped the wires out of a pressure sensor, then stuck said wires into an electrical outlet, shorted out the room, and no, they did not get out. In his defense, he knew a lot about electricity. In high school, I used to work in an escape room for my co-op. I usually just watched cameras and swept up the room after everyone was done. In our medieval room, there is a ventilation hatch really high up on the ceiling. It's really out of sight, but if you're looking for it, you can find it. I've witnessed 6 full-grown guys form a human ladder to try and open the hatch with a bobby pin they found on the floor because they thought it was part of the room. I had to send in my colleague before any of them got hurt, though.
Hey guys, I've got an idea of how we can escape this medieval-themed escape room. See that modern-day ventilation shaft up there? I bet that's the way we get out.
Worked at an escape room while I was between jobs. We had a room that had a long vase glued to a table with a key at the bottom. There was a stick magnet located in the room, but one of the first things people usually found was the other magnets utilized in another part of the room. This person took off a shoe, completely pulled the laces out, and tied it to the small magnet to stick down the long vase. Creative, but completely unnecessary. Plus, then it was super confusing when they did eventually find the long magnet stick. I guess that's the issue with these things. People find stuff, get so excited that they found a clue or potential answer for how to get out of the place, and they want to use it immediately. So then they're like, wait a minute, but it doesn't quite work. Maybe they expect us to use our brains even more and think outside of the box. Like, I understand that. It's kind of like, I know, going on a tangent, but it's like when I first played Dark Souls. I went straight to the graveyard, tried to go all the way into the catacombs, was just like, this is the way I need to go. Of course it is, because the game's supposed to be super freaking hard. And then I took another look around and found the stairway to the Undead Burg, and it was way easier, and I was like, oh, well, now I just feel silly. You know, there's the expectation of what you know about something vaguely, and then there's the reality of the matter. Escape room employee here. I have witnessed a few of these, but most have been told to me by co-workers. Picking a lock with a girl's bobby pin. We provide a key. Thought they had played the room before and were cheating, prying a threaded bolt off the wall with their bare hands, shouting the answer into the camera, the game mic, or writing it on paper provided and blocking our camera with it, instead of, you know, doing the puzzle in real life. We cannot physically lock our rooms due to fire code, so people try to leave the room and come back with power tools we have in our lobby from room construction and maintenance. There's a 7 to 8 foot armoire in one room. We've had to get people off the top from it before, and this is again after telling them repeatedly that everything they need to interact with is eye level or lower. Writing on the clues we slide under the door and asking questions, and most stupidly, sticking metal objects into power outlets. When you subscribe, make sure to to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.